Hey, everybody. I am back. Wow. It's been a long time since I've streamed, and I'm really glad to be back. We've got a lot to catch up on, and a lot is happening. So, yeah, let's talk.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So as you know, it's been a really long time since I have been able to stream. But first, I got sick. My spring allergies just went crazy right after our LA workshop. And so I was not feeling well, came back to New York, but I just didn't have the energy to stream. My fall allergies were bad, and I had a big overseas trip coming up. And so then I went to Russia for the Global Digital Forum. Very exciting. Did some overseas travel. And then I thought I was going to go directly home to New York. But as you all know, Los Angeles has been gripped by some intense rioting and protests. And so rather than flying directly back to New York City, I ended up going here to Los Angeles, where I am right now. You're looking at the interior of my hotel room rather than staying in my lovely Brooklyn apartment with the bookshelf. I am here in Los Angeles in a hotel room. And so here we are. So the way we do these streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, first I give some opening remarks. Tonight it's just going to be catching up on everything going on in the world because a lot has happened while I've been away, and there's a lot to catch you all up on. And then from there, we do a roll call. We find out who is on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. And the way you can send questions, questions can be sent on Rumble as Rumble Rants, or you can Cash App me at Caleb Maupin 22, $ Caleb Maupin 22. Your questions really make the second half of the show what it is. It's your questions that really make things what they are. So that's the format of the show. Now, we do have a big announcement, which is that the biggest event that my organization, the Center for Political Innovation, has ever done is going to be happening in less than a month. And I am very excited. Shout out to Noah. Shout out to everyone in Chicago who's working hard for it. Shout out to all the people who've already booked their flights and all of that. This is going to be a big event. This is going to be the anti-imperialist mega rally of the year. We have the Midwest Convention Center rented out. I don't know why it's not showing the image. It's not being cooperative. It doesn't want to put the image on the screen. That's a bit annoying. Let me see if I can pull it up another way. Hold on. Yeah, there's maybe another image I can put on. Why is it not being cooperative? But yeah, July 12th is going to be our biggest event yet. It's going to be pretty awesome and pretty amazing. Working families first, defeat the deep state. For a world beyond imperialism. Let me see if this version works. Let me see. Okay, well, here's the door hanger flyer of it. Working families first. This is the door hanger. We've been hanging on doors throughout the Chicago area to raise awareness about the event. Working families first, defeat the deep state for a world of peace and innovation. July 12th, doors open at 9 a.m. It's going to be an all-day mega anti-imperialist rally. Let me get a bigger image for you. Hold on. It's going to be an all-day mega anti-imperialist rally in Chicago. It's going to be tremendous. Garland Nixon, some important anti-imperialists will be announcing pretty shortly. People who've never spoken at CPI conferences before, some important guests that you haven't heard of yet. There's going to be dance performances, traditional dance performances from certain ethnic communities that are sympathetic to what CPI stands for. That's going to be pretty cool. And on top of that, there's going to be music and speeches. It's just going to be an all-day mega anti-imperialist event. And I guess I'll put the bigger image here on the screen. Here we go. Working families first, defeat the deep state, embrace a new world of peace and innovation. July 12th, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's all day. There's going to be 3 sessions, many different important anti-imperialist speakers, music, all kinds of great activities. It's going to be really, really awesome. It'll be at the Midwest Conference Center in 401 Lake Street, North Lake, Illinois. It's very, very, very close, like 5 minutes away from the Chicago O'Hare Airport. So if you can be there, you don't want to miss it. This is the anti-imperialist event of the year. Thank you to everyone who is coming. Thank you to everyone who has donated. We've received some very good donations to make sure that we have the resources to pull this event off, which we really, really appreciate. If you can come, please register to let us know that you're going to be there so that we can be prepared for you. Obviously, security is going to be tight at this event, so if you're coming, please pre-register. That'll make things better for us. We always want to do everything we can to protect our participants and our guests, etc. If you can't make it, or if you just would like to support the event, we do have a GoFundMe that we have set up for donations for the event. So please donate. Please consider sending a donation to support the event, this GoFundMe. It's also linked down below in the description. So both of those are here. I'll put it in the Rumble also. There we go. There's the GoFundMe, and we'll do the registration. There are a number of hotels near the Chicago O'Hare Airport. I see someone already sent a Rumble rant about that. There's a number of hotels. And so we obviously need to reserve some for our guests who are staying. And yes, we are doing Rumble rants and super chats for this stream. So yes, but this is going to be the biggest event of the year. This has been my focus for really a year, but especially in the last couple of months. So join us in Chicago. It's going to be really, really important. So now we're following the same old format that we do on these streams, which is first opening remarks, then the roll call. Then I answer your super chat or Rumble rant questions for the rest of the night. The way to send Rumble rants is on Rumble. You can, questions can be sent via Rumble rant, or they can be sent via Cash App. Hold on. Cash App, $ Caleb Maupin 22. Those are the 2 ways that we can receive questions tonight for the second half of the show. So if you got something you'd like to ask, or you got like me to comment on for the second half of the show, please send a Rumble rant or Cash App me to get your question in. So where are we at, folks? Where are we at? Well, it appears that it doesn't appear. It's just a fact that Israel brutally attacked Iran. It was an absolutely criminal, unprovoked attack. Absolutely criminal, absolutely unprovoked and unwarranted. It was horrible. There were, a number of Iranian generals, and their entire apartment buildings were demolished. There were a number of Iranian peaceful scientists. Their entire apartment buildings were demolished. What Israel did on Thursday to the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is absolutely criminal, absolutely criminal. And a number of civilians were killed. A number of top generals of the military were killed. A violation of Iran's territorial integrity, murdering civilians in densely populated areas. This was a murderous attack. And Iran has faced an endless amount of provocations from Israel. They had top leaders killed in the consulate in Lebanon. They faced some other attacks. And at this point, Iran responded to each of the attacks. This time, Iran said, okay, we've given a limited, mild response to your recent attacks. Now Iran has taken the gloves off, and we're seeing the missiles flying on to Tel Aviv and on to Haifa. And Iran is demonstrating that they have the capacity to retaliate. And they have destroyed a number of key military bases of Israel. The body count in Israel is rising. And, I'm not happy about this at all. Okay. I'm never happy to see anyone killed. War is a horrendous thing. And, you and I, we don't know what it's like to have our homes bombed. We don't know what it's like to have the apartment building that you're in collapse all around you. So, my heart goes out to anyone in that situation. Okay. So that's the first thing. So, we need to be very careful. A lot of us are very angry at Israel, very justifiably. And we see Israel as the aggressor here, which they are. We need to be careful to not celebrate the death of civilians, because that is something that only feeds these kind of conflicts, and it's not healthy. You should never want anyone to suffer or be killed, right? That's just not a proper way of viewing things. That said, Iran had no choice. They had to do this. Right? How could Iran not respond at this point? If you murder top generals of the country, right? Trump murdered Qasem Soleimani, the top Iranian general, when he was in office, and Iran gave a mild response. Israel destroyed their embassy, their consulate in Lebanon, and killed a top general there. At this point, Israel did this horrendous attack. At this point, Iran had to do this, right? They had no choice. It's not a matter of it being right or wrong. It's not a matter of it being a good thing. I'm certainly not happy to see this is happening, but Iran had no choice. And if you look at the situation objectively, any country that faced this kind of cowardly, illegal, murderous attack, any country would respond the way Iran is responding right now. Okay? Right? You can imagine that if, Russia or China or Venezuela, if they went to the United States and blew up an apartment building to kill a top general, you can be sure the United States would retaliate against the country that did that. And the fact that this isn't, just common sense in mainstream media. Again, not saying that it's good, not celebrating this, but Iran has to show that they can protect their people. They have to show that you can't do this, right? You push people around and they push back. That's how this works. And it's an awful situation. I will say, though, and I'm still trying to process this, I am disgusted with Donald Trump and the way he has responded to this situation. Donald Trump ran for office saying he was less warmongering. Tulsi Gabbard, his director of national intelligence, somebody who said that she was going to prevent war with Iran, and Donald Trump was negotiating with Iran, but it now appears that those negotiations were not sincere, and that while the USA was setting up negotiations with Iran around the issue of its peaceful nuclear energy program, the USA was aware that Israel was planning this attack. I'm very, very, very worried about this. I try to look beyond personalities, right? It's not about good guys and bad guys. Okay. I'm beyond that, right? If you want to talk about who's good and who's bad, I think the force of good in the world is the emerging economy that is rooted in anti-colonial revolutions, the Belt and Road Initiative and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the axis of resistance in the Middle East, Russia and Bolivarianism in Latin America, and the new wave of independent African governments, Ibrahim Traore and the Sahel states. That's who I think is good. I obviously think the Western imperialist system is bad. I love my country and I love my people. I'm proud to be an American. I am not ashamed of my country and its history. But at the same time, I recognize that we are at the center of a satanic international order called imperialism. Lenin called it imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. The founders of our country, Alexander Hamilton and Henry Charles Carey, they called it the English system. The Russians at this point, they call it Atlanticism. Whatever you want to call this system, it is satanic, right? And it is a satanic evil system, and I'm opposed to that system. Now, there are good people in Russia. There are also some not so good people in Russia. There are good people in Iran. There are some not so good people in Iran. But I view the system that is emerging in opposition to imperialism as the force of good in the world. And I believe the only future that America has is eventually joining with that system, which will not be easy, right? It's going to be very difficult for America to be restructured to be part of the new alternative emerging economy in the world. But that's the only way our country has a future, is if we join that. But beyond that, is Donald Trump good or bad? I don't think Donald Trump knows what he's doing. I think Donald Trump is a businessman. I think Donald Trump is a reality TV star. And that said, the way he responded to this, the way it appears that his negotiations with Iran were not sincere, that's devastating, because that makes it very difficult, almost impossible for Donald Trump to continue to be a deal maker, right? I saw that North Korea has already rejected a letter from Donald Trump offering to restart the negotiations. Russia is supposed to be negotiating with Trump to resolve the Ukraine war. China just made an official deal with Trump regarding their tariffs and their trade and all of that. And it looks like Donald Trump, by admitting that he coordinated with Israel to do this attack and faked out Iran with negotiations, it looks like Donald Trump may very well have completely blown away his ability to be a negotiator, right? If you announce to the world, I'm a liar, I deceive people in the way I negotiate with them, nobody's going to negotiate with you. And that appears to be what Donald Trump has done. He has announced to the world that his negotiations with Iran regarding the nuclear issue were not sincere. And then that says to me, now we can't negotiate. We definitely can't negotiate with Iran at this point. But we also can't negotiate with Russia. We can't negotiate with China. And this is devastating. Okay. I'm still trying to process how devastating this is. It is just absolutely devastating. That said, there's a bigger danger right now in the Middle East, a much bigger danger, which is Israel wants the United States to join in a war with Iran. Now, it appears the White House doesn't want to do that. Right? I see Rand Paul and others are saying that the White House doesn't want to sign on to a full-on war in alliance with Israel against Iran. But apparently that's what Israel wants. And there's a lot of members of Congress that are loyal to Israel. And Trump, ass kisses Israel endlessly. And there's a danger that we could be in an all-out war against the Islamic Republic of Iran very soon. And that I find to be completely terrifying. I'm really hoping that in a few days, somehow this can de-escalate. But Alexander Dugin in Russia, Scott Ritter and others have said we are in kind of an Armageddon scenario. This is like a World War III kind of scenario right now, with Iran unleashing its might against Israel in response to a cowardly, completely illegal, completely unprovoked attack by Israel. Iran and at this point, what I am impressed with, there's a couple things that give me hope. The first thing that gives me hope is seeing all the countries in the world supporting Iran, including countries that have not been friendly to Iran in the past, like Saudi Arabia. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia announced full support for Iran and its retaliation against Israel. In addition to that, I noticed Pakistan announced full support for Iran, and furthermore, Pakistan has nuclear weapons. And Pakistan said that they will use their nuclear weapons to defend Iran from Israel. So Iran is getting an unprecedented amount of support. The UN Security Council, Russia, China came out and said that, Israel crossed a red line with their attack on Iran. So I am blown away by seeing, I'm really pleased that the international community is rallying to support Iran right now. That I'm impressed with. The second thing I'm impressed with is, even though I am just disgusted with Trump right now, the MAGA movement the MAGA movement, they are not supporting Trump on this. Marjorie Taylor Greene said no war. She doesn't support this. She doesn't think about Iran. Marjorie Taylor Greene is against this. Candace Taylor, who is my friend, an important Republican in Georgia, who's been on this YouTube channel before, she said she's not down with going to war. And she, and so it seems that a lot of the MAGA base are not ready to march with Trump into war. And I'm happy about that, right? And I think a big mistake, it would be, again, a big mistake to just retreat into being woke leftists, because the woke left is completely useless. And we can talk more about that. I was just among them today. I was in a crowd of thousands of woke leftists dodging tear gas and bullets, and I'll show you all of that pretty soon. But we're in a very, very dangerous situation. I wish I try to push optimism here as much as I possibly can, but I mean, there's no way to be optimistic about this. We are in a conundrum. Now, world events tend to move very quickly lately, right? World events tend to not be functioning very slowly. So who knows where we'll be next week? But this needs to de-escalate immediately. And I'm wondering how Trump can ever be a negotiator again. I'm wondering how that's possible. I'm wondering if we could end up going to war with Iran because that's what Israel wants. This is nuts. This is dangerous. This is insane. This is a very, very bad situation. And I wish there was a way to gloss over that. Again, I'm happy about the MAGA base not marching with Trump into war. I'm happy about that. And I'm happy with global support for Iran in the face of all of this. I've been to Iran a number of times. It's through visiting Iran that I rediscovered my Christian faith. And I had kind of an awakening, a spiritual awakening that led to the formation of the Center for Political Innovation. So my heart is with the Iranian people right now. And I know people in Iran that are suffering. And I mean, this is such a dangerous situation. And the fact that anyone can think that what Israel did was anything but a senseless, murderous, criminal provocation that is bringing the world to the brink of World War III, that's what this is. And if anyone tries to tell you this was somehow an act of self-defense by Israel, they have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, this was a blatant act of terrorist assassination by Israel, targeted assassination. Apparently, they used cell phones to track where these generals in Iran were, and they blew up their apartment buildings. Absolutely reprehensible. And Donald Trump knew it was happening and was using the nuclear negotiations to fake out Iran, which is so despicable. I am trying to not speak too much on this issue, because I want to see what happens when the dust clears. Because again, one thing leads to another, which leads to another, and we don't know what's going to happen here. But this is a really extreme international crisis that we are in. It's a very, very extreme international crisis. And I will say that I do not have any regrets about the CPI strategy, because Donald Trump was very much courting the peace vote when he ran for president, especially in his second term. And people like RFK, people like Tulsi Gabbard spoke about wanting peace with Russia, and Trump bragged about his efforts to negotiate with North Korea. And we made a strategic decision as CPI to boost that message within the Trump campaign. I have no regrets about that. Right? We found the best things that Trump was saying, and we tried to emphasize them and show that there was support for that in the streets and among the public. And I have no regrets about doing that. And we did our best, right? It appears, though, I would encourage you all to read a very important book by Vladimir Lenin called The State and Revolution. We're not dealing simply with elected officials. We're dealing with an apparatus of armed men. We're dealing with the military. We're dealing with the policing agencies, with the intelligence apparatus. And even though the majority of the American people want peace and do not want war, and even though Trump very much tried to appeal to those sentiments in his election, it appears that that aspect of MAGA didn't prevail. Now, is there any hope for that? I don't know. And I'm trying to reserve judgment, right? But I urge you to not think about this in terms of personalities, who's good and who's bad, right? Because if you start thinking that way, you're lost, right? This isn't about who's good and who's bad. This is about how can we advance world peace and prevent World War III, and how can we move the United States toward joining the new economy in the world and getting out of imperialism. And the fact that there's a huge section of Trump's base that doesn't approve of this, that's really important. And the fact that the woke left is completely worthless, that's also important to talk about. So none of that has changed, right? The fact that people that are opposed to the FBI and opposed to the American establishment are in the MAGA camp, even though Trump has betrayed them. And the fact that the woke left is completely worthless and controlled and awful, that hasn't changed either. So, we need to just kind of get our bearings here, right? And we need to just kind of wait for the dust to clear and hope that this de-escalates. This must de-escalate. That's the main thing, because I can see nukes going off pretty soon. I mean, we are like very, very close to nuclear war at this point, right? If you haven't realized that, if this doesn't de-escalate soon, we could have nuclear Armageddon. I mean, I'm not being hyperbolic here. Like, for real, there could be for real nuclear war very soon if this doesn't de-escalate. Right? Iran has to respond to this. Israel is now asking for an all-out war against Iran. Pakistan is saying they'll defend Iran with their nuclear bomb. Israel's got nuclear bombs. Russia and China are aligned with Iran. I mean, this is getting dangerous, folks. This is getting very, very, very dangerous. And if it doesn't irk you on some level that this was even in any way allowed to happen, I don't know what to say. I mean, we're in a really bad international situation. And it's very, very, very bad. I'm certainly not happy to see any civilians harmed or anyone harmed, really. I mean, the fact that Iran is now having to demonstrate and able to demonstrate that it does have the ability to retaliate, that says something on Iran's part. That demonstrates that Iran is a strong country, right? That can take action and can respond when it's being targeted. And that shows that Iran, is capable. And I'm proud of Iran for sticking up for itself, right? And that, their responses to these previous provocations were rather restrained and had me a little bit worried. But now when I see what's happening, not happy about seeing all those missiles falling on Tel Aviv, never happy to see any civilians suffering. But at the same time, I'm saying, Iran, hey, you got to push back. You got to fight back, right? You got to fight back. Any country would do that under these circumstances. So I don't want to get circular in how I talk about these things. So obviously, I'm not in Iran. I'm not in Israel. And I've been overseas, and we'll talk about my overseas trips a little bit. But where am I right now? I'm in Los Angeles. And I'm here because there were anti-ICE protests. Earlier this week, the Immigration Customs Enforcement agencies were carrying out some rather aggressive raids in Los Angeles. And there were some rather provocative demonstrations against them, which were rather small, but they were provocative, right? Fireworks were shot off, windows were broken and stuff. And so Donald Trump responded to it by sending the military to Los Angeles, which Governor Gavin Newsom didn't approve of. He said that as the governor, you should ask me before you send the military in. Donald Trump doesn't like Gavin Newsom. Donald Trump doesn't like the Los Angeles city government, considers it a sanctuary city. So to kind of stick it to LA, Donald Trump sent the military, federal troops, National Guard, and U.S. Marines to Los Angeles, to suppress the protests, and they declared a curfew. So in response to that, there have been some big protests every night. People have been gathering and marching until the curfew and refusing to leave, etc. So today there was a big rally, a huge rally in downtown LA. We're talking tens of thousands of people, maybe even 50,000 people. It was huge. I was there interviewing people. I'm going to have video of that later. And the crowd started to thin, and then the protesters kind of gathered in front of City Hall, where they were confronting the federal troops. Right, there's federal troops, National Guard, U.S. Marines, kind of guarding the City Hall, and then all hell broke loose this afternoon. And I was there. We were in downtown LA, near City Hall. We weren't very close to City Hall. We were pretty far away from City Hall, but we started hearing explosions. There were these little firework bomb kind of things that protesters were throwing. And so then rubber bullets started being shot at protesters. And then there was tear gas being dispersed here and tear gas being dispersed there. And then all hell broke loose. And I got to tell you, I have no idea what was going on. I was standing along the side of the street. Shout out to Dan, shout out to Ishmael, shout out to Joey, who were there with me. You know, CPI comrades were there with me. And we're just standing there along the side of the street. All of a sudden, these cars are speeding by as fast as possible. And out of the window, explosives are being thrown. Kaboom, 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 are being thrown out of the windows at the protesters. These bombs are just being thrown at the protesters. And so we're all like dodging bombs being thrown at us. It was utterly terrifying. There's smoke everywhere. And all of a sudden, were those police? Were those protesters? Somebody speeding by in a white car is just throwing bombs at us, and we're just like ducking. And then the armored cars and military vehicles just started rolling in, and the riot gear, and all the people. We got out of there. But all the people that were at City Hall were kind of trapped. They couldn't leave, right? And they were blocking off the streets down by City Hall. It was very, very crazy. So, I got a little bit of battle footage that I filmed with my phone, but I was there with a cameraman, so I've got a lot more footage you'll be seeing soon. It was very, very intense out on the streets. I'm going to show you some of the video that I shot with my phone. Two like quick clips of what was happening when the explosion started, and then later. And then there'll be much more footage like posted tomorrow. I mean, there was a protester injured who broke his leg, and there was another protester who got hit in the head with rubber bullets. I was really out among them today. I had brought my helmet, and it was pretty wild.
In downtown LA, it seems the crowd is now throwing explosive fireworks towards the federal troops that are positioned around City Hall. Explosions are taking place, as you can hear behind me. It's getting quite intense.
Yeah, that was when the explosion started down by City Hall where the federal troops were. We started hearing kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. And then this is later. We were kind of in the same area, and this is someone drove by.
Cars are going by, throwing explosives at protesters. It's not clear who is in the cars, but they are throwing explosives at the protesters. They're driving at high speed through the streets, throwing explosives.
Yeah, and so it was very wild. Now I've got all kinds of footage. At one point there was like a car that was like parked, and it was just spewing smoke out of the car. And it wasn't like the car was on fire. The car was just had like a smoke, thing in it. It was very bizarre what was happening, right? And you'd think like, if the people in the cars that were throwing the explosives, if they were protesters, why would they be throwing the explosives at the protesters? That didn't make any sense, right? But then if these were police, why were they not in police vehicles? And the whole thing was just very, 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 very crazy. Very, very crazy. But I will show all kinds of video. I will show all kinds of video later. We got all kinds of video of all kinds of things happening. We all got an alert on our phones telling us that, the downtown area was declared an illegal assembly and all of this, and all of that. But, before all this happened, I interviewed protesters. And I got to say, where do I stand on this, on this issue? I don't approve of what ICE is doing, right? And I don't think having raids in the immigrant community is going to make us safer. I realize, the woke left glosses over this, but I realize how brutal MS-13, the gang is. I realize, there's issues that need to be resolved. The fact that people are coming into this country in mass. I realize how dangerous that is, and that, we can't just ignore the issue of mass migration. That said, terrorizing immigrant communities, making people afraid to call the police, that's only going to make all the problems worse, right? Is it legal to pay an undocumented worker less than minimum wage? No, it is not, right? If you hire an undocumented worker, you must pay the minimum wage. But the reason people get away with not paying undocumented workers minimum wage is because they're afraid of being deported. So they don't report them. Well, if you make them afraid, they're going to be even more. So the problem of them driving the wages down gets worse, the more you terrorize them. And the same for the gangs, right? If you want those gangs to really flourish, make it so immigrant communities are afraid to call the police, right? And also, immigrant folks, some of them just cross the border, but if you build a giant wall, they're still going to have to get across the border. So who's going to take them across the border? The gangs, the coyotes, right? So it's going to make it worse. So all the things that are real problems that conservatives are upset about immigrant workers driving down wages, about immigrant, workers crossing the border, about immigrant communities having a big problem with crime and gangs, all these things get worse the more you terrorize immigrant communities. It doesn't solve the problem. So, that said, I don't approve of what ICE is doing. Now, I recognize this is like an internal ruling class fight, right? That the FBI is against Donald Trump, right? The FBI basically rigged the 2020 elections by, suppressing Hunter Biden's laptop story. Kash Patel was appointed head of the FBI to basically fire a lot of people because Trump used the FBI as against him. The CIA is very, very liberal and against Donald Trump. So ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, which was created by Barack Obama, that's a conservative police force, right? And it's more loyal to Trump. So Trump is boosting them, right? Is boosting ICE because they're loyal to him, right? And this is a Bonapartist struggle within the ruling class, right? There's different factions of our American state, and the Trump faction of the ruling class has support from ICE. And the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris faction of the ruling class, they have the support of the FBI and of the CIA. And so this is Trump is boosting ICE and sending ICE out against these protesters. It was under Bush that ICE was created, right? But it continued under Obama. But yeah, and that's the issue here. So where do I stand on this? I don't like what ICE is doing. But the protests, they don't have an answer, right? The protests are just kind of like, ICE bad, Orange Man bad. The protests are very, very, and these protests were very much sponsored. I mean, they were sponsored by Walmart, sponsored by George Soros, the Ford Foundation, et cetera. And, I was very polite. I interviewed a number of protesters today and yesterday, and I said to them, why are you here? What speaks to you about it? And the answer I got was basically Orange Man bad. We hate Trump. Trump is awful. And then I would ask them, well, what about the billionaires supporting it? And some people just said, I don't care. There's billionaires on our side. There's billionaires like Musk that support Trump or whatever. But then there were a number of protesters that got angry at me for just mentioning that there were billionaires on their side, and just walking away. I had one guy just walk away as soon as I asked that. And it's like, and that's what I find very frustrating about interviewing protesters, right, in general. And I've been a protester. I've organized many protests in my life and I've been at them. And when I go and interview protesters, I will give them the opposition argument to get their response. I'll say, hey, some people have pointed out, blah, blah, blah. What do you say to that? And instead of responding, I'm giving you an opportunity to refute the other side's argument. You get this angry, and they march away. And that's because there's so many. I know that there's a lot of people who go to these protests and film people to try and make fun of them or whatever. I'm not doing that, right? I'm very clearly not doing that. I make a point of being really polite when I interview protesters, but I had to say to them, okay, now, what do you think about the fact that today's protest was supported by a lot of billionaires? And I had a couple protesters walk away. Oh, I'm not going to talk to you. Are you a conservative? Are you a Republican? And I'm just like, my goodness, that you can't handle. I'm throwing you a softball. Knock it out of the park. And it's infuriating. And I'm always worried I'm going to get punched at one of these rallies. I've been so badly canceled on social media, and every so often I get some doofus running up to me and, I saw you on the internet. It's like, my God, if I was at a rally supporting North Korea, somebody walked up to me and said, hey, Caleb, or hey, protester, you're supporting North Korea. Some people say it's an evil dictatorship. What do you think? I would answer the question. I would say, well, and I would give them a fucking answer, right? I don't understand. It infuriates me. The fact that I can be so polite. I'm on tiptoes when I interview protesters. So what do you think about the fact that there's some billionaires supporting this? Oh, you must be right way. And they run away like, grow the fuck up. Seriously. Right? I mean, my God. I mean, the immaturity. I mean, the childishness, there's probably people that are going to watch this that don't agree with you. Tell them something they don't know. Respond to what they might be thinking. My God, It is really frustrating. I find it very frustrating that protesters can't handle, I'm basically, I'm pretty much on their side. I'm not thrilled about I don't think the Stop Trump movement is coming from a good place. When it comes to the ICE thing, I agree with them. I don't think what ICE is doing is helping working families in America. I don't think it's helping make us safer. So I pretty much agree with them, and I'm being very polite. It's very frustrating dealing with protesters that are like that. And I will say the political level of the demonstrations was very low today. I mean, there were thousands of people out there, but almost every sign was "fuck Trump." I mean, literally the F word Trump. Or they had a Trump blow up like an inflatable Trump, or they had Trump piñatas. They had American flags and Mexican flags, which, by the way, all these people were out there today, Mexican Americans, anti-Trump protesters with American flags. They all must be Nazis, right? They all must be Nazis because, that was the argument against CPI. We wave the American flag, so we're clearly Nazis. That's what all the communists said. The Communist Party USA and Workers' World and PSL, the fact that we wave the American flags means we're Nazis. So I guess all these people out there, all these Mexican Americans that are against Trump must all be Nazis, right? You fucking idiots. I just want to slap these people, but anyway, they're out there with American flags, right? Because most people aren't woke. Most of these people out there, I would say, are not woke, right? They're anti-Trump. They're liberals, right? They don't agree with Trump's immigration policies. They don't agree with Trump in general. They're liberals. They're not woke. Woke people are brain damaged. Woke people have a certain mindset that, if you wave an American flag, you must be a white supremacist. I would never. These people aren't woke. They're just people who don't agree with Trump's immigration policies, people who think Donald Trump is not a good president. And that's the interesting thing. If the Democrats would dump the woke, they would be a much stronger political party. But the only way that the Democrats can appear radical and appear to have any oomph is if they go woke, right? They won't embrace economic populism because they're a party of the imperialists and the oligarchs, right? And Bernie Sanders tried to kind of push the economic populist button, tried to kind of sound like Roosevelt, and they just slaughtered Bernie Sanders and wouldn't even allow him to be a real candidate in the election. So the only way the Democrats can appear fired up is to do this stupid woke shit, which I think when it really gets down to it, a lot of the people that were out there, a lot of these Mexican American working people from here in LA, I don't think a lot of them are woke. I think they just don't agree with what ICE is doing. Right. I think that they're out there. I'm proud to be an American. I'm Mexican, but I love my country, America. And, these raids are not good. They're not good for families. I think most of the people that were out there today were not woke. Right. And that they were out there with the American flag. A lot of them were out there with Roman Catholic images, of saints and all of that. And that these people aren't the enemy. Right. They're not the enemy. Right. They're not, when I rant against woke people, I'm not talking about them. Right? I'm not talking about them. These are hardworking Mexican American folks who love their country and think the ICE raids are bad for the whole community. And they want to prosper. They want to have the American dream. Good for them. I have no hostility toward them. None at all. The woke faction, wokeism is a very, very small minority, but it's like the most shrill and extreme. It's the gender studies. It's the fake degrowth Marxism. It's a certain pessimistic, unhealthy kind of social media brained personality. That's what woke is. We're not talking about every liberal is not woke. Every Democrat is not woke, right? And that the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were out there today, the overwhelming majority of them were not woke. Right, I would say they were just people who don't agree with ICE, and I don't agree with ICE. Right, I mean, I basically agree with these protests. I just don't agree that with the anti-Trump hysteria. Right, that's where I don't agree. I don't think Donald Trump is Hitler. Right, and I don't think Donald Trump is that much worse than. I'm certainly horrified by his latest foreign policy moves, but his foreign policy rhetoric was slightly better. I mean, I don't know. I don't agree that Trump is the ultimate evil and that he's a fascist and all of that. That I don't agree with. I don't agree with Trump's Stop Trump hysteria. And I think a lot of what the MAGA movement stands for is good, like not wanting to get into foreign wars, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is denouncing Trump and his attacks on Iran, et cetera. Like Thomas Massey, like Rand Paul. There's a lot of good stuff in MAGA, right? That said, Donald Trump, his presidency so far has been a bit of a disappointment, I will say. I don't think Trump is Hitler. And I think that the Trump is Hitler syndrome is coming from a bad place. And like even the name of the protest, the National Day of Action, it was called No Kings. kings. That was the name of the protest. No kings. Well, again, they don't understand how these things work, right? Like, the idea is that Trump is, becoming quote unquote authoritarian, centralizing power. Well, that is what we need. We need a leader who transcends class and centralizes power to suppress the rich and powerful. We need Bonapartism right now, like Roosevelt, right? Roosevelt was a Bonapartist, right? We need some kind of strong leader that can get the country in order. That's not bad. What's bad is that Trump is not doing a good job of it, and he's using it to support Israel. And there's plenty. But the idea of a strong leader for the country is not bad, right? And the idea you want to fight oligarchy, right? That's Bernie Sanders, AOC. They want to fight oligarchy. If you're going to fight oligarchy, you need strong leadership. You need a Bonapartist. Roosevelt fought oligarchy because he mobilized the labor unions and he packed the Supreme Court and he kicked ass. That's how he was able to fight oligarchy. If you want to fight oligarchy, you need strong leadership. And the theme of all these protests is anti-authoritarianism. Anti-authoritarianism leads to the de facto rulers, which is the billionaires, right? Strong leadership is not bad. All right. We need to get out of our minds this idea that a strong leader, authoritarianism. No, we're not against authoritarianism. We need authoritarianism to control the billionaires. Donald Trump is not doing that. That said, I hoped that maybe he would restrain the warmongers a little bit or something. He's not doing any of that. Okay. But the protesters, their critique of Trump on the immigration thing is 100% correct. I agree with that. But they're kind of the mindset of like no kings, anti-authoritarianism. They don't understand that. Authoritarianism is the only thing that can challenge the oligarchy. Trump isn't doing that, but we cannot oppose authoritarianism. And there were a few really stupid signs with pictures of Trump next to Xi Jinping, next to Maduro. There was some of that, right? And that's just disgusting. That's just absolutely disgusting. But that said, there were also some signs talking about Gaza, right, and opposing Israel. So that was good. So it was a mixed bag. The crowd, it was very mixed, right? A lot of different people there. A lot of different people there, but overall, it was just kind of a liberal mobilization, and it got messy towards the end. Now, I don't know how long I'm going to be here in LA. I got shit to do back in New York. We got to pack up and start heading to Chicago for our convention. There's a lot going on, that we've got to do. But yeah, let's see where we're at in terms of questions for the second half of the show. I see there's a few Rumble rants. Oh, there's 5 Rumble rants that have come in. Let's see about the Cash App. I guess Phil said he sent a Cash App. Phil sent a Cash App. Have we seen current events play out in the past? I don't quite understand what you mean, Phil. You might want to expand on your question there. You might want to expand on your question there a little bit, Phil. But anyway, so what we'll do now, we'll do the roll call. I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations. Then we'll answer some questions. I'll show some video, stuff like that. I'm glad to be back. Thank you all for waiting patiently while I was overseas. I hate not streaming. Streams are the main way I communicate with all of you. I know it's really, really important for our community that I get on here and engage with you night after night. I intend to be back on here as much as I can, but I'm glad to be back. So names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Penny from Minnesota, back from No Kings, Minneapolis. Very good. Bob and Troy, or Ryan in Kansas City. Bob in Troy, New York. Alex in Brazil. Jenny in Cincinnati, St. David's, Bermuda. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Brutus Lee in Montreal. John McPeace in Chicago. Derek in Tacoma, Washington. Eric in Lockhart, Texas. Jacob in Wisconsin. Tom Macy in St. Louis. Tony in Tasmania. Phil Sang in Miami, Florida. Patrick in Maine. Names and locations. Morgan in Philadelphia. Auckland, New Zealand. Domingo in New Jersey. Fred in Silicon Valley, Quinn and Meredith in Eatonville, Washington. Shout out to both of you. Venice Beach, another view is possible, another world view. Names and locations. Anybody else, I will call you all out As I see you, names and locations. Jorge in Brooklyn. Shout out to you, Jorge. JT24 in Mississippi. Good to see you. Good to see you. Fred in Silicon Valley. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else with us here tonight? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Hi from Ecuador. Chaska. Welcome, Chaska. JT24 in Mississippi. John McCarthy wasn't available as a Rumble handle, says John McPeace. Patch in Arizona. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see everybody out here tonight. We're having a great live stream. Patch in Arizona. All right. Fong from Oakland. Welcome, Fong. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. California is a lovely state, I will say. The weather here is really nice. It's kind of a California vibe that I really like. I really like the California vibe. There's something very beautiful about it. I might be leaving this state tomorrow, but I might not be. I might be here for a little while longer. Based on, what happened today, I might be here a little while longer. We shall see. But I really love your state. If you're a California native, know that Caleb loves your state. Reminder, the most important event of the year is coming up. The flagship anti-imperialist mega rally of the year is happening, and that is Working Families First, Defeat the Deep State, Embrace a New World of Peace and Innovationism, the Center for Political Innovation National Convention, an all-day anti-imperialist mega rally on July 12th, 2025, right near the Chicago O'Hare Airport at the Midwest Conference Center in North Lake, Illinois. Do not miss it. If you come to one event this year, make it this one. This is where you got to be. If you're coming, please register because security is important. So please register to let us know that you're coming. So please register to let us know that you'll be there. If you can't make it and you would like to support our efforts, please send a contribution. We could use a donation because it's costing us a lot of money. But man, I was just talking to a certain ethnic dance team representative. We're going to have a community dancers. It's going to be awesome. We got Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn. Shout out to you guys. Hope you're enjoying it. I wish I were in Grenada or Nicaragua. Yeah, that's might be a safer place to be right now, depending on how much international events escalate. But yeah, join us at the event. It's going to be a really, really awesome gathering if you can be there. It's going to be the flagship anti-imperialist event of the year, our national convention. We're rolling it all out, showing people what CPI can do. It's going to be really awesome. Link to register is in the description. And if you can send us a donation to help offset some of the expenses, that would be awesome as well. That would be much appreciated as well. All these costs do add up. So it's going to be great. So that was just our roll call. Oh, we got Ellie in Chicago. Shout out to Ellie. We got Richard in Woodland. Very, very good. We're taking questions here in the second half of the show. Rumble rants and on the Cash App. I guess, why was I overseas? Well, I was at the Global Digital Forum in the city of Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. And it was pretty great. It was pretty good. It was an international gathering dedicated to the challenges of artificial intelligence. And it was all the BRICS countries. And there were a number of anti-imperialist countries there, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, a number of African countries. I got to meet the owners of the biggest clothing manufacturer in Nigeria was there. Vietnam's government was there. Cuba was there. It was all about artificial intelligence, fact checking, how Wikipedia is deceptive, and Wikipedia has kind of infiltrated the international internet, and Wikipedia is heavily edited to set the discourse, the need to push back against that. It was really, really awesome. So it was in Nizhny Novgorod, which is in Russia. It's like a city. It's about 5 hours out of Moscow. So this is the video of my participation at the forum. I gave a speech, and there was like a panel that I spoke on with representatives of South Africa, with representatives of Nigeria and France and Germany. It was pretty awesome. I'm going to show the video. I do apologize for the fact that when I'm speaking, you can hear my English, but below my English is the dubbing in Spanish and Russian. So it makes the part where I'm speaking a little bit hard to get through. So I do apologize for that. But this is the video from my trip to Russia. I've been back a little while. I'm here in Los Angeles. Then after that, I'm going to answer people's questions. So, I'm still accepting questions, Rumble Rants, or on Cash App, Caleb Moppin 22. You want to send your questions in. I'm going to show my video from the Global Digital Forum, this important anti-imperialist gathering of technology companies, telecommunications firms, and others that took place in Nizhny Novgorod. So here we go.
Беру штампель, прикидываю, чтобы он ровно стал.
We focus on enhanced diagnostic intelligence, developing the AI-driven robots and AI-empowered pharmaceutical upgrading. For cooperation, Syria has established a cooperative mechanism with institutes for
says if you're not careful, the newspaper will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. So that's one of the most important reasons that, personal reasons that we need to be careful about the health of the information we got.
Intervenant des États-Unis qui va nous raconter les manipulations des médias occidentaux.
And my greeting comes from America, from the United States, but not from the America that you see on television or on social media, from the real America. The real America that rejects the deception that is so widely promoted. The real America that can see that just like our leaders spread lies around the world, they also spread lies within our own country. And I come here to congratulate you, because the reason that we're here today is because we want
the outlets that the Western imperialist, globalist, Atlanticist financial system uses to set discourse. The New York Times, Financial Times of London, the Wall Street Journal, ABC, NBC, Fox, BBC. These outlets are discredited. Around the world, people don't believe them, people don't trust them, and the global population around the world and even within the Western countries themselves no longer accepts their deceptive narratives, the narratives they use to sell their wars, the narratives that they use to destroy countries with neoliberal economic policies that impoverish millions of people. The world has largely rejected that, and we have been victorious. And that is a point of celebration, but it brings us into a new phase, because what's going on now, as we've heard so eloquently today from other speakers about artificial intelligence and the manipulation of social media, is that the powers that be have accepted defeat, and that they're no longer able to just completely control the discourse as they once did. So now they're engaging in a form of manipulation. They are trying to use the weaknesses and the negative tendencies of the forces and the people around the world that oppose them against themselves. This is, you can compare it to the martial art of jiu-jitsu, where you use your enemy's momentum against himself. You use your enemy's strength and turn them into weaknesses. And that is essentially what they are trying to do as they are trying to regain control of discourse. I would point people towards the period in Italian history called the Years of Lead. In Italy, you had the Years of Lead, and this was because the Italian public largely did not want the country to be part of NATO. The Communist Party was on the verge of winning elections, and so we saw the Western intelligence apparatus engage in a policy of manipulation, the manipulation of far-left extremist groups and far-right extremist groups against each other, the fomenting of extreme political violence, creating a culture of political confusion, and by fomenting the Years of Lead with Operation Gladio, the Western intelligence agencies were able to create kind of a feeling of hopelessness and confusion among the Italian public, and even though the Italian public wanted to leave NATO, the NATO status quo was able to triumph because they were able to manipulate the dissident communities and create so much confusion. And that seems to be what they're trying to do now with all of this artificial intelligence fakery, with the manipulation of social media. They are trying to tap into the weaknesses of all of us and try to control those of us who are already beyond thinking and accepting their narratives, trying to manipulate us in one way or another in order to maintain their power.
All right, so what I'm going to do, since that audio is a little bit bad, I'm going to skip towards the end. You can watch the whole video. It's on the YouTube channel if you want, but I apologize for that bad audio quality. I'm going to skip to the end so you can see the rest of the video, and just show you the end of the video, and then we'll start answering questions. So thank you for your patience there. Wanted to show you the end of the video. So here we go.
Thank you.
You're from South Africa?
Yes, I'm from South Africa. I'm Divyashni Mudley. I'm from the Durban University of Technology. We are attending the Global Digital Forum. We are being hosted by the Friendship University of Russia. We are here to learn more, engage more, and actually get our students to be able to compete on the international platforms. So far we've been doing very well. Part of the BRICS, we've been participating at the different BRICS championships. We've secured many homeland prizes, and yeah, we just look forward to engaging. We really enjoyed your interview yesterday, and the panel discussion was a fresh of breath air for us. Learning that different Americans have different views, and it was good to see that you were able to actually air your views in an open forum together with a South African sitting on stage. Yeah. So we look forward to it. Great. Thank you.
Permitirá que la tecnología ayude a las personas a enfocarse en estrategias creativas. Me calling. I live by the river.
Don't stop now.
Yeah.
Please sit down.
Looks like it's going to be a great meal they've prepared for us. Look at that.
Un pasado ruso muy francés. Una época que hay 20 maridos que hablaban.
What are you doing that side anyway? Now, like it's a sky bridge to nowhere, bro. You cross the highway and then you get.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. One of the people in the video there, you may be familiar with him, is Pepe Escobar. Pepe Escobar is a brilliant anti-imperialist journalist. Yeah, you guessed it, Pepe Escobar, brilliant anti-imperialist journalist from Brazil, who's done a lot of great reporting on the BRICS and on anti-imperialism. He was there. It was really great to have a meal with him, and it was really, really great. I was really glad to be a guest. And if you want to watch the whole thing, it's on the YouTube channel here. So you can watch my whole presentation. And a woman from South Africa asked me a question and I responded to it. Because the audio is a little weird, I didn't want to subject the whole audience to that for now. But you can see that's on the YouTube channel. And I'll be posting more. There's a lot more video from today on the streets of Los Angeles that we'll be sending. That'll be up pretty soon. I got to go through all of that and finish editing it. It's going to be quite wild. So thank you for that. At this point, I am going to start answering people's questions. Now we did, let me remind you, the way questions can be sent in, questions can be sent via Rumble Rants on Rumble, or you can Cash App me at Caleb Maupin 22. Those are the two ways you can send questions. And we've received one Cash App question from Philip. And Philip, you need to clarify more about what you mean with your question. I don't quite understand what you're asking. So Philip, if you want to give a follow-up about what your question is before I answer it, that would be awesome. Now we'll start answering Rumble Rants. And Philip, when you follow up, I'll answer your Cash App question. So, all right. So the first Cash App question is Kinky is asking, do you recommend a hotel next to the O'Hare Airport? I don't have a recommendation. There's a number of hotels near the O'Hare Airport, and I'm actually in the process of finding the right hotel for our guests, right? We have a number of guests that are flying in for the conference. I need to find a hotel for them. I haven't even found their hotel yet. So I'm a little behind on that. The Airbnb where our team is staying, that's been taken care of. If you're part of the 7-day program, and the 7-day program is really blowing up. We have a very large Airbnb in the Chicago area for our 7-day team. There's going to be about 25 CPI activists, volunteers in Chicago for the 7-day program from July 8th. From July 8th to July 16th. That's really awesome. We got a really large Airbnb. That's really, really great. But as far as hotels, I just need to figure out which hotel in the area where we're going to put our guests. But I probably won't announce that on here for security reasons, obviously. But, there's a number of hotels in the area near the Chicago O'Hare Airport. So if you're going to stay at a hotel, just pick one. I also noticed, just throwing this out there, if you need more of an excuse, our July 12th CPI convention is happening at the same time as G-Fest 2025. Now, what is G-Fest? That is Godzilla Fest 2025. So if you are a Godzilla fan, maybe you can fly to Chicago, attend the Godzilla convention, come to the CPI convention, go back to the Godzilla convention. Hey, why not? Right. There may be many people that are, certainly not thrilled about the history of Japanese colonialism and imperialism, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy a nice movie about a giant reptile destroying Tokyo and breathing fire and, walking very slowly as he destroys Tokyo, apparently in another hotel, not the Midwest Convention Center, but in another hotel in the O'Hare area, the Godzilla Fest of 2025 is happening. So if you need another excuse, right, maybe you're a CPI fan, but your girlfriend or your boyfriend is a huge Godzilla fan. They hate CPI. They hate everything CPI stands for. They're an anti-innovationist, but they love Godzilla. You can say, hey, girlfriend, hey, boyfriend, hey, romantic partner, let's make it a twofer. You can go to Godzilla and I can go to the CPI convention. Think about that, right? Yeah, think about it, right? So there you go. Mothra versus Godzilla streamed straight from the CPI event. There you go. Good times. Good times. Yeah. And apparently, I didn't know, but there is a person, not going to out you if you're watching, right? I won't tell your name, but there's apparently a person who watches this channel who told me that they're definitely coming to the CPI convention and they're going to G-Fest 2025. I didn't know what it was. I found out, wow, right near the O'Hare Airport, same general area, is going to be the annual Godzilla convention, believe it or not. So, shout out to the person who made that something that we're aware of. We have nothing against Godzilla here. Godzilla, the original film in Japan, was actually a warning about the dangers of nuclear war. If you remember correctly, the reason that Godzilla awakened was in the original Japanese film, which they never showed in the United States, was because of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? They made a film in Japan about Godzilla, and it was Hiroshima and Nagasaki awakened Godzilla. They thought that would be offensive to American audiences, so they redid the movie. They had this American actor be the main character in the movie. He goes to visit Japan, and it's the testing of the H-bomb, right? That, and that's the way it's pronounced, right? They have a Japanese American actor. He says the testing of the H-bomb is what awakens Godzilla. The H-bomb, which by that he means bomb. He's just saying that with an accent. So there you go. Godzilla Fest and CPI convention all in one weekend. Man, I don't know if Chicago will ever be the same. They won't know what hit them. Let me put it that way, right? They won't know what hit them. So there you go. There was, years ago, I think it was on the anniversary of Charlottesville. I was covering the massive protests outside the White House because the white supremacists were having a demonstration on the anniversary of Charlottesville in front of the White House. And I found out there was a Comic-Con convention across town. And I thought, an Antifa was mobilizing all these people. And I was really worried that one of these, these Comic-Con kids would dress up as his favorite elf, or his favorite dwarf from the Lord of the Rings. And he'd have like elvish runes on a shield. And he'd be walking down the streets and Antifa would see the elvish runes and be like, those are white supremacists. And they would jump on him and beat him up or something like that. I was really worried about that. Right. Or that, or perhaps, somebody would come dressed as Thor from the Avengers movies, right? Thor. And someone would, one of these Antifa would see that, oh my God, Thor, that's Norse mythology, white supremacist. And they would beat him up or something like that. Or maybe somebody from the Comic-Con would dress up as their favorite ninja character and they'd put on a ninja outfit and people would think that they were an Antifa. And the white supremacists would beat them up because they got people with, masks over their faces. So I thought, it was very dangerous to have a Comic-Con convention and an Antifa and a mobilization against the Ku Klux Klan in the same place. It's very dangerous, very, very dangerous. So there you go. I think having Godzilla and CPI in the same general area is probably fine. It's nowhere near as dangerous as having Comic-Con and the Ku Klux Klan in the same city. Not anywhere near as dangerous, much safer. And as far as I know, there was no injury. There was no such incident. There were no Lord of the Rings fans beaten up because Antifa thought their elvish runes were actually white supremacist signs. No Thor impersonators beaten up because they thought it was Norse mythology. No ninjas who got into fights with Nazis because they thought they were Antifa. None of that happened, as far as I know. I mean, if you found out about such a thing, there you go. But I didn't hear of such an incident. I will say, though, that a few years ago, the first time I started to have doubts about the Antifa stuff, when I was an activist, when I was in the Workers' World Party, I thought Antifa was awesome. I don't think that anymore for a number of reasons, including they don't like me and they've threatened me. But years ago, when one of the first doubts I had was, I think it was in Los Angeles. There was some kind of white supremacist rally that Antifa and, PSL, Party of Socialism and Liberation, were protesting. And I saw who they were protesting. And it was this very overweight, large man in a German helmet with a spike on his head. And he was wearing a cardboard shield. And there was this crowd. I saw this image of this crowd of like, young people with signs like yelling at this guy in a German helmet with a cardboard shield. And I thought, hate and racism is obviously a bad thing. The Ku Klux Klan, all these groups are bad, but it's like, if there's a grown man who's wearing a German helmet and he's carrying a cardboard shield, like, is he really a threat? I mean, picking on him is almost like beating up a disabled child or something. I mean, it's like, it's like if somebody is that, like, is that really the greatest threat to, our way of life? Is some guy, a grown man with a cardboard shield wearing his like German helmet? I mean, it's like what I did, I think when I was, a kid, I did trick or treat. I dressed up as a knight. One year I was a knight and I had a cardboard shield. I like got a pizza box and like cut a cardboard shield. I mean, and if somebody's doing that in their adulthood, are they really a threat to you? I mean, is this like a threat of violence against any black and brown person walking by? I don't think so. And I remember looking at this picture, this crowd of, I think it was Party of Socialism and Liberation members. They're like jumping on this fat guy with a cardboard shield. And I remember thinking something's not right here. Something's off here about this. This is not necessarily the most revolutionary activism I've ever seen, right? If a fat guy wants to walk around Los Angeles with his German helmet and his cardboard shield, you might as well just leave him alone. I mean, it's not the end of the day. Well, Phil thinks the helmets look cool, so we're going to beat you up, Phil. I'm just kidding. We're not going to beat you up, Phil. Have fun in Miami. But Perry Mason, is that who it was? Oh, interesting. I know it was the American actor. I've seen Godzilla King of Monsters, the American one, with the like American actor walking around Hollywood, like narrating it. It was Perry Mason. Well, there you go. You learn something new every day. Next question. Now that we've gotten Godzilla out of the way. Will Russia and China and BRICS come together to support Iran, or will they stand aside? They seem to be supporting Iran. I mean, they seem to be supporting Iran. China officially came out and said that what Israel did crossed a red line. Very cool. Shanghai Cooperation Organization officially came to Iran's support. Russia defended Iran at the UN Security Council. Pakistan said they will use their nuclear weapons to support Iran, which is like, damn, so I am really blown away by how much support Iran is getting. It seems like Iran, has a lot of powerful friends who are willing to defend them. But then again, that also pushes us closer to nuclear war. That's why this situation is so damn scary, right? And that's why, I mean, it's the way what Trump did. What in the world is Trump thinking when he comes out and he says, "Oh, I was faking them out"? I mean, how can any country negotiate with America ever under Trump's leadership? No country can negotiate. What the hell was Trump? I mean, my goodness, when Trump did that, I was just, and John McCarthy, and this is, wow. I mean, that's just, for Trump to do that. And does he think he's ever going to negotiate with any country again? I mean, I worry this ruins the Ukraine negotiations. This worries the deal he just made with China. This ruins any hope for North Korea. I mean, it's what Trump, this is very, very, very bad, right? And as I said before, I have no regrets. We did the right thing. We boosted the pro-peace message of the MAGA movement, which is still alive, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. No regrets, absolutely no regrets, right? And there is no pro-peace wing of the woke movement. There's none, right? There is none. If you say anything good about Russia, you're a Nazi, you deserve to be beaten up and killed. They think that anyone who waves the American flag is a Nazi, so, we did the right thing. The people in the United States that are the most anti-war and have the most influence are the anti-war folks in MAGA. Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. Right? And we boosted that message strategically. No regrets whatsoever. Absolutely no regrets. One thing we will not do is retreat into Trump derangement syndrome. But that said, it's going to be hard for Trump to convince me that there's anything good at this point. I mean, his first term was pretty bad, and what he's doing now is absolutely abominable. And I don't know how we back away from the edge of World War III at this point. I'm very, very, very worried. So as I said before, no regrets, but yeah, there we go. There we go. And I mean, hey, we got to work for peace. Somebody's got to work for peace. But what Trump did here with Israel that was a devastating blow to the hope for world peace. Devastating. All right. Next question. Trump's military parade and the protest against ICE. Well, I've been talking about the protest against ICE for the last hour or so. Trump's military parade. I'm not offended by a military parade. There's nothing wrong with a military parade. The military has a parade. So what? Right? And the liberals being all triggered by it. Again, this is why I will never get Trump derangement syndrome. There's nothing fucking wrong with a military parade. Okay? Maybe there's a lot wrong with what the U.S. military does, but in Russia, they have military parades. In China, they have military parades. In North Korea, they certainly have military parades. There's nothing fucking wrong with a military parade, right? And the mindset, it's like, oh my God, it's a military parade. They're wearing uniforms. That scares me. That is shrill, woke crap, right? And there's nothing wrong with a military parade. There's a lot wrong with what the U.S. military does. There's nothing wrong with a fucking military parade. And the fact that is even something that the stupid left is saying, I don't like military. They're all wearing the same uniform. Oh my God, I'm triggered. Well, the Black Panthers, why do you think the Black Panthers wore uniforms? Is that because they're secretly Nazis? No, it's because when you're building a movement of people that are standing in solidarity, you have uniform. I mean, there's nothing fucking wrong with a military parade. Nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with it, except that it's glorifying the U.S. military and what it does. But that's where this kind of being triggered by any kind of mass movement, being triggered by any notion of a strong leader, right? That is what woke is, right? It's this toxic, anti-populist thing. There is nothing wrong with a military parade. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a military parade, in my view. Grow up, okay? Every country in the world has a military, right? And having a parade for your military, nothing wrong with it, right? Nothing wrong with it at all, in my view. Okay? So I might need to keep my voice down. It seems like I heard somebody walking by in my hotel, so I might need to lower my voice here. And this has been going on for a while, but I need to answer people's questions. So anyhow, let me see if there's anything else. All right. The fact that Israel was able to kill individual people in their apartments proves that they're blowing up entire hospitals in Gaza was deliberate genocide. Very good observation, John. Very, very good. Right. If they have the capability of tracking individual people in their apartments, why did they have to blow up a whole hospital? Oh, oopsie daisy. I mean, they clearly don't have to. That's a very, very good point. That is a very, very good point, John. Yeah, and that's, we're being told that Israel, they do everything they can to protect civilians and all. No, they don't. Right? And that they blew up whole apartment buildings just because there was some military general from Iran there. I mean, this is bad. This is pretty awful. So that's a very good observation, right? They're justifying all this, all these civilians killed in Gaza, and yet they somehow had the ability to precisely figure out exactly where these Iranian military people were, where these Iranian scientists were. Give me a break, right? Compare and contrast Trump's military parade with Putin's Victory Day parade. Well, I haven't watched Trump's military parade. I was out among the protesters all day, so I haven't watched it. But I guess the big difference would have been that, Russia's Victory Day thing was many countries included, right? I mean, it was every anti-imperialist country you ever heard of, Vietnam, China, North Korea, many different world leaders there. And it was celebrating the global struggle against fascism. Whereas Trump's parade was just kind of glorifying the U.S. armed forces, which is very different. Very different. The Victory Day parade this year was really amazing, absolutely amazing. Haven't watched. I watched the military parade that Trump did when he was in office the first time. I mean, it was just kind of a display of U.S. military stuff, and that really what Trump is doing is he's boosting the military, right? He's the military. The military, it tends to be low-income people in the military. It tends to be, African-American folks from urban areas and rural whites that join the military. And they're people that are largely not respected by the American government. They join the U.S. military in a lot of cases to pay for their college because of lack of economic opportunity, because they're hoping it'll help them get a better job. And there's this whole big thing about thank you for your service, but they don't mean it, right? And soldiers get ripped off, right? They have all kinds of rip-off loan sharks that set up right near military bases that know exactly when they get paid, and they rip those guys off and they get in debt. I mean, and I am not against the military. I'm not. I think that our military is full of amazing people who love their country, who want to make sure that nothing like 9/11 ever happens again, who want to keep us safe, and are hardworking people that are from our class. Their lives get put in danger for causes that don't benefit us or them or anybody, and that's wrong. And they get treated very badly, and they use them as guinea pigs, right? One thing they do in the U.S. military is they're always injecting them with different vaccines and different pills just to see what happens. You read about Gulf War syndrome and all of that. You read about depleted uranium and what that has done, to soldiers. I mean, I am very much an admirer of many of the people in our U.S. military. I think they're great people, and I think they are victims, and that their lives get put in danger needless. Look, there could be very soon a number of U.S. troops dead. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm seeing reports that Iran is saying that they will strike against U.S. troops that are in Iraq, that are in the Middle East region. That's abominable. Why do we have troops there to begin with, right? There's all these military bases. There's that graphic that's very famous, right? Iran, let me find it, right? Let me see if I can find it. It's a really popular graphic. Here we go, right? This is a really important graphic. It's one of the best memes. It's a meme that just never gets old, right? And let's just show this on the screen. All right, here we go. This is a really great meme. And it's been around forever, but it just never gets old. Iran wants war. Look how close they put their country to our military bases. Look at that. All of those bases have hundreds or thousands of U.S. troops. All of those guys, their lives are now in danger. They could be dead. There's all kinds of people from Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas and California and Alabama and New Jersey that are in danger of dying right now because of what Israel just did, right? Iran is going to retaliate. They've said they may soon be retaliating against U.S. bases. Think about all of these people, all of these Americans who are now at risk because of what Trump allowed and cooperated with Israel to do. Oh, my goodness. That makes me angry. I care about those guys, and I don't want them to come home in body bags. I think they're good people, and they shouldn't be here. Why in the hell are they surrounding Iran? We got all these bases. Look at this, right next to Iran. And so Iran is going to have to respond, and there's a very good chance those guys could be dead soon. I mean, that's absolutely wrong, right? Those guys need to be brought home. They should not be in harm's way. And it infuriates me, right? It doesn't make me anti-American to not want these guys over there. These guys shouldn't be there, right? We shouldn't be surrounding Iran with military bases, and we shouldn't be backing Israel and engaging in senseless aggression against Iran. And so these guys' lives can be on the line. It's absolutely crazy, absolutely crazy, absolutely crazy. So. Yeah, think about that. We're not against the U.S. military. And the notion of having a U.S. military parade doesn't offend me at all, right? Maybe when I was a kid, I had kind of an edgy, I was a teenager, first getting interested in communism. I was confused about these things. But, it's so wild. So I'll just run you through this real quick. When I was a kid in the 90s, and especially after 9/11, the talking point that everyone had was you should never protest a war. You can never protest a war. Ever, ever, ever. Never, 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 never protest a war. Because during the 1960s, there were all these hippies, and they went around spitting on soldiers, and they disrespected our troops. And that's why you should never protest a war ever again. Right? That's what I was told, right? And that's when the Iraq War happened. We all put up yellow ribbons, and it's like, well, now that the war started, you can't say you're against it because that's disrespecting our military. Then you're like those hippies who spit on our troops. And there was this whole thing I heard about, anti-war people were disrespectful. They disrespected the military. And I grew up near Kent State in Ohio, right? 1970 was the Kent State Massacre. I grew up in Orrville, Ohio, which is not that far from Kent State. That was what I was told about the Kent State Massacre. those 4 students, they deserved to die. Why? They were disrespecting our military. They were spitting on our troops. They were against America, And so I was constantly told leftists are anti-American. They spit on our troops, right? So then I actually became a communist, and I found out that wasn't true. And I found out that actually one of the main things that the anti-war movement did is recruit the soldiers. The Revolutionary Communist Party, they started the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And John Kerry, who ended up just becoming a stupid Democrat, was the leader of the Maoist communist group that was recruiting soldiers. And the Workers' World Party, they started the American Servicemen's Union, the ASU, started by Andy Stapp. And they had newspapers, and they would go to military bases. They weren't spitting on the troops. They were trying to recruit them. And Jane Fonda set up, she went around all over the world, to the Philippines and to Okinawa, doing elaborate shows with rock bands for troops to convince them to try and recruit them to join the anti-war movement. It was just a bullshit lie, right? That maybe one thing happened here or there, but largely the anti-war movement wasn't spitting on the soldiers. It was trying to recruit them, because they knew that if the soldiers refused to fight, they could end the war. And that towards the end of the Vietnam War, part of the reason the USA pulled out was there was complete disunity within the military, right? And that, when they would show a movie on a U.S. military base, they began the movie with the national anthem. And in military bases, they would begin the movie with the national anthem, please rise to the national anthem, and all the soldiers would sit down, and they would sit there. And they would just sit there, and they wouldn't stand up for the national anthem on the military base, right? That so many of the soldiers were like, what are we doing in Vietnam? This war sucks and all of that. So, and so the idea that the anti-war movement hated the soldiers, bullshit, absolute bullshit, right? And I would correct it, but it was just something, it was this propaganda point that I was told about Jane Fonda, and that was in the movie Forrest Gump and all this, they spit on our soldiers, but it wasn't true, right? And in fact, the anti-war movement was really friendly to soldiers and recruited a lot of them. And that's part of why the war ended. So there you go. So fast forward to the era of woke. Woke people actually hate military people. And I kid you not, right? I mean, look, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, PSL, I have big differences with them. I think they're not a great group. But one thing that I don't object to is that one of their leaders is a guy named Mike Preisner, who's married to Abby Martin, the filmmaker. And he's a veteran. He's an Iraq war veteran who turned against the war. Good, great. I have no objection to that. But I have seen woke people go, PSL has soldiers in their group. He's a baby. I'm like, you guys are being the caricature, right? My whole life I've been explaining to people, no, leftists don't spit on soldiers. No, and woke people on the internet do that, right? And like, and it's infuriating to me. This is why I don't call myself a communist anymore. Because these people, they look at the stereotype, all the lies that we're told about leftists and all of that, and they just become the stereotype. I spent my entire adult life explaining, no, we don't spit on soldiers. No, we want to recruit the soldiers to the anti-war movement. No, it's because of the soldiers. We want to. And then the woke people come along. Oh, PSL has a soldier in it. He's a baby killer. I'm just like, it's infuriating to me. This is why I can't deal with communists anymore. I really can't. I mean, they're LARPing. It's live action role play, and they're literally acting like everything that we're told. Peter Coffin, who I absolutely admire. Go check out Peter Coffin. Great member of CPI. I mean, he talks about, that so much of what passes for leftism on the internet is just no, but it's good, right? They absorb every stereotype, every mischaracterization, and they just go, yeah, but that's good. And it's infuriating, right? And it's gotten to the point that there are so many people going around LARPing the stereotype of what a communist is, that in order to make clear that's not what I am, I have to be something different, right? I don't hate the military, right? I certainly don't believe in degrowth, right? For years people would say, oh, those are, I had a nice pair of shoes, and I would go out to protest, and someone would say, oh, those are fancy shoes. I thought you were a communist. You're against wealth. And I would explain, no, we're not against wealth. We want rational control of the means of production so we can eradicate poverty. These people actually are against wealth. They believe in degrowth. Growth is bad. The problem with capitalism is it just creates so much growth. You can't, these people just embrace every stereotype, and they're not interested in building a real movement. They just want to make their parents angry and they want to dress up in silly costumes, and they have absolutely nothing in common with any of the communist governments in the world. Nothing, right? I mean, and so it's like, it's gotten to the point that it's like, why try to correct people when there are these people walking around trying to be the stereotype of what we're all told a communist is? We're doing our own thing. We're doing innovationism, right? And I do have differences around dialectical materialism. I believe in God. I believe there is a creator, and I believe in Jesus Christ. And, dialectical materialism says that all that exists is matter. Well, I believe in spirituality. So I'm not a classical Marxist in that sense, right? And I believe that the dialectical materialist worldview does lend itself to vengeance, right? The belief that change only comes through confrontation. Sometimes change comes through confrontation, but other times change comes from reconciliation. And that the belief that confrontation is the only way that change comes forward, that leads to kind of a destructive, vengeful mentality. And that's something I've long believed. So, we believe in economic growth. We want the banks, factories, and industries to be rationally organized to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. But within that planned economy, there's certainly a room for, free enterprise, for private companies. And in fact, the main thing that socialist and anti-imperialist governments do now is invest and create, entrepreneurs, right? In Nicaragua, their socialist economy, the micro entrepreneurship program is the strength of it. In China, that's one of the main things they've done in China is with the government, with state central planning, they subsidize and they enable Chinese people to start their own businesses. So that's great. And that globalism, imperialism, right? The system of ultra monopolistic capitalism that is trying to keep countries in poverty, that is the main danger. And that's what Lenin said, right? We're not against capitalism, we're against monopolistic imperialism, and we will align with capitalists against imperialism. Lenin said that, right? And 21st century socialist countries utilize the market to strengthen their overall planned economy. Like, all of this is just kind of common sense outside of the West. But in the United States, communism is nothing but a caricature. It's just people, it's all the stupid anti-communism we're told, and they go, yeah, but that's good. And they believe capitalism creates endless growth, which it does not, and they think that's bad. Well, no, growth is good. It's just capitalism has this problem called the tendency of the falling rate of profit and overproduction, and it can't create endless growth. Well, they don't know that, right? They think wealth itself is bad. It's just everything. And this is why we have to just give our movement a different name. We have to be something different, right? We have to just say what we believe in is economic growth, and we need a government of action that will fight for working families and unleash human creativity and enable people to start their own business and be creative with a planned economy that invests in the people and invests in human beings as an asset that can create growth, right? That's the main problem, is that there's a fundamental disagreement at this point. The imperialists believe that humanity is a barrier, that the cause of the economic crisis is overpopulation. There are too many people in the world. They want to reduce consumption, reduce the population in order to stabilize the economy. Whereas Marxists and anti-imperialists and everybody basically that is not part of the imperialist Malthusian cabal believes that human beings are the source of wealth, that it's human labor power and human innovation and creativity that is the source of wealth, and that we need to invest in people and in communities and families and build and construct. That is the way that we will have a better society. And we need a government that will rationally organize the economy to lift people up, right? Whereas the imperialists want to degrow and depopulate so they can stay at the top of the world. We want to control, we want to beat down the billionaires. We want a powerful government that will defeat the billionaires and the monopolies and invest in communities and unleash human creativity and growth. Now, if you go to China, they call that socialism with Chinese characteristics. If you go to Vietnam, they call that a socialism-oriented market economy. If you go to Iran, they call it not capitalism, but Islam, resistance economy. If you go to Venezuela, they call that Bolivarian socialism. If you go to Nicaragua, they call that Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. If you go to Africa, I don't even know. What does Ibrahim Traore call it? I don't even know what he calls it. But Ibrahim Traore, that's what he's doing. He's a military leader, and he's using the military to build new farms. They're having a farming boom. Very excited. Penny, our member of CPI, has a book
on Ibrahim Traore. It's about to be published. I'm really excited. I'm helping her get it all together. In time for the convention, we're going to have Penny's book about Ibrahim Traore and about the Sahel anti-imperialism. And like Ibrahim Traore is a builder, right? And he's using the government, and he's giving, pregnancy. Any woman who goes to the hospital to give birth, it's totally free in Burkina Faso now, 100% free, because they need more people to have more wealth. And he's, building, he's building pineapple orchards and increasing crop output. Well, what is it? Well, Ibrahim Traore, he was the head of the Marxist Student Association at his college, but he's also a Muslim, right? He's a Sunni Muslim, and he goes to the mosque and he prays, and he's a very, very loyal Muslim. So what is he? Is he a Marxist? Is he a Muslim? Is he an African nationalist? He's good. I'll tell you, that's what he's good. And he's controlling the economy, and he's enabling Africans to start their own farms, and he's increasing the population. He's providing medical care. He's giving all the students in Burkina Faso now get a stipend, so they don't have to have a job while they go to school. They get paid to go to college. What do you call that? Right? There's a free market. There's people opening their own businesses, but you have a powerful government that invests in people and invests in communities. What do you call that system? That's what I'm for. Right. And, in the communist world, they call that 21st century socialism with Chinese characteristics or whatever. In Russia, they have that system. They don't call it communism anymore, but they have a popular government that invests in communities and starts businesses. Right. Whatever you want to call it, that's what I'm for. I'm for a government that breaks free from imperialism, that beats back the power of the big monopolies, and invests in communities and unleashes human creativity in order to build and construct and views human beings as the source of wealth, not as a burden, not as a cancer on Mother Earth. Human beings are the source of all wealth. Human creativity is a little spark of God within all of us. God is the creator of all things, and human beings are the only species that has the ability to alter its environment and force the environment to serve us and constantly reinvent our relationship with nature. We have a spark of divinity within us. We have a soul, right? We have a piece of God within us, right? And that is to be celebrated, right? And that is what is amazing about human beings. Human beings are good. Human beings are the source of wealth. And we need a government that is pro-humanity, pro-family, pro-community, and pro-growth. That's what I believe. Whatever you want to call that. You can call that whatever you want. I call it innovationism. And that's what we believe at the Center for Political Innovation. We believe in innovationism. We are pro-growth, pro-humanity, against globalism, imperialism. And that's what we're for. And, in order to really get that message out there and not have it wrapped up in red flags and hammers and sickles and, all kinds of crazy stupidity, we have to not call ourselves communists anymore, because communism is so gerbled and confused, right? Around the world, if we were in Africa, we'd just call ourselves communists, right? If we were in Asia, we'd just call ourselves communists. And we wouldn't be the only ones. There's all kinds of people. You go around the developing world, there's all kinds of people that are for this. But in America, it's a unique political brand because we reject the pessimistic politics, the anti-human politics. We're not on the right because the right believes that they don't want a strong government to control the economy. They want a weak government that just lets the market run rampant. And we're not on the left because the left is anti-growth. They think human beings are bad. They think growth is bad, and they think the people are the enemy, that the masses of people are racist and sexist, and they need to be controlled and politically corrected. They're against humanity. So we're not against humanity like the left, and we're not in favor of neoliberal free market capitalism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps like the right. We're neither, right? We are pro-humanity, pro-growth, anti-imperialist, anti-globalist, pro-family, pro-community. We are innovationists. That's what we are. I hope I'm summarizing it well for you. And that's why this movement is urgent. And people say to me, Caleb, why don't you just join this other communist group? No one talks this way. Name one other organization that talks the way we do in America. There are none. We are the only optimistic, pro-community, pro-working families movement, right? And don't talk to me about ACP. Don't talk to me about ACP. ACP is literally glorifying Luigi Mangione right now, right? They think they don't want to build a mass movement that's in communities. They send their members out to take selfies volunteering at a church, but then they glorify Luigi Mangione, right? They think terrorism is the answer, right? That's what they think. They think that, some pessimistic, depressed Italian kid going and murdering somebody on the street is the answer and should be promoted. I don't believe in terrorism. I don't believe in terrorism and left adventurism and violence. I don't, right? I believe we need to build a real network of people who come together and have each other's back. That's what I believe. So, don't give me that, right? Don't give me that. And the amount of negativity that organization engages in, the constant mudslinging and smearing, anyone who disagrees with them immediately gets, feces thrown at them, all over the internet. That's not a good group of people, right? And we're nothing. We have nothing to do with them. We're a separate group, and we just don't want to engage, right? The internet is rigged. If you haven't figured it out, the internet is rigged. CPI is not an internet organization. I'm using the internet right now as a vehicle to talk to you all, and it's great, but we're not an internet organization, and we're not going to win the internet. The internet is rigged. It's rigged, and the internet is negative. And in real life, real connections, real communities, the floodwaters are rising, right? We're Noah, and it's time to build an ark. It's time to build an ark because the floodwaters are rising. And, when the floodwaters start rising, your Twitter followers are not going to save you, and your likes and your shares on Facebook are not going to save you. What's going to save you is the community of people and the infrastructure that we have. And that's what we urgently need. And I'm going to build that. And I'm not interested. I'm really not interested in trying to win the internet. We've got to build our community. We've got to build a network of anti-imperialists who can rely on each other. And when the FBI came for the Uhuru movement, we were there for the Uhuru movement. We were at all their court dates, and we were at the federal courthouse. We were raising their case at the UN, raising their case in Russia, because we knew that Uhuru, they built the infrastructure. And right now in Missouri, neighborhoods are devastated by the tornadoes, and they're providing relief. They're helping people. They're providing real community relief in Missouri right now. It's amazing. Working people have been left behind in a tornado. And so now the Uhuru movement, an anti-imperialist Black organization, African internationalist organization, is providing relief to people. That's amazing. We would like to someday have the organizational capacity to do that, right? That's what really matters. Not how many likes you get, not how many shares you get. And on top of that, when they come for one of us, we have to be able to stand in solidarity. And when they came for the Uhuru movement, we were there for the Uhuru movement. And other people were too busy looking at themselves on social media and too embarrassed, right? And we actually have principles. And even though we don't have the same perspective as Uhuru, they come for one of us, we stand with them, right? And that's not the perspective other people have. Other people just want to be internet famous, right? They just want to be internet famous. We're not going to be internet famous. The internet is rigged. The internet is rigged. And if you are a sincere anti-imperialist and you don't think what they tried to do to Chairman O'Malley and Jesse Neville and Penny Hess, if you're not frightened by that, you're not sincere. And that's what makes me think there's a lot of insincere people who talk the way I talk about Russia and such. Because why weren't they sending all their members to the court date? Why? Why weren't they doing anything to support Uhuru? Right? Why did we have a press conference at the United Nations that was supposed to be about Uhuru, but I'm the only person that even mentioned Uhuru in my speech? Why? Think about it. Just think about it. Why are they not worried, right? The federal government raids people's homes, calls them Russian agents, drags them into court, tries to send them to prison for 15 years just for speaking about Russia. And they're not concerned about it. They're not worried about it. They don't send anyone to their court dates. They don't do anything about it. Why? Right? Why? Well, I guess they're just so narcissistic. They want to be on the internet. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's worse. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want nothing to do with these people. Anyway, we're way off track, but okay. Prepare Putin's Victory Day parade. Was anyone out there at these protests talking about Iran or Gaza? There were a few people. There were a few people. A number of people were wearing keffiyehs. There were a few people with signs about Iran. And there were some people erasing it. No, it wasn't the predominant message. The overwhelming majority of what I saw in the streets of LA today was Mexican flags, American flags, and signs about Trump being a dictator or a fascist or a king. That's the overwhelming majority of what I saw. There were a number of Palestine-related keffiyehs, signs. That was about it, right? That was about it. The Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP, they have their kind of refuse fascism organization. I was a bit impressed with how they were set up, right? They had their big orange, banner set up at a big display, and they had a number of volunteers. I was very impressed with how they were set up. And there were some labor unions that were involved that had petitions about healthcare and stuff that were kind of doing the Bernie Sanders stop oligarchy thing. I will say what blew my mind was how few communists I saw. The RCP was there, but they weren't even there as the RCP. They were there just handing out refuse fascism. They didn't have anything about communism. They were just there doing Trump as a Nazi, join our group because we're against Trump. But it's like a front group. It's like a united front. And then the Internationalists, which is a weird, it's one of those ultra Trotskyist, ortho Trotskyist groups. It's a split from the Spartacist League. They were there. Right. And I saw them, and one of them came up to me and is like, "Are you Caleb?" And I'm like, "Yep, I'm Caleb." I know who you are. And walks away. Oh, all right. Well, that's great. The internationalist clubs, which are the internationalist group, which is like a Trotskyite group, they were there and they had a lot of signs about class struggle and whatever. But, but other than that, I didn't see very many communists out there. And there's another group that's a breakaway from the Progressive Labor Party. I saw them, the International Communist Workers Party. They were there, and I guess they're a more recent, like in the last 5-6 years, they split from the Progressive Labor Party. There was like 3 or 4 of them, and they had a sign, "We need communism." Okay, that's great. Nobody knows what that means, and the people who do know what it means don't know it right, but whatever. And they were there, they had signs, "We need communism." But mostly it was just liberals. Mostly just liberals, and anarchists. There was a lot of anarchist, flags, the circle A, the red and black. I saw some anarchist stuff, but very few, years ago, if there was any kind of left mobilization, there'd be a million Trotskyite groups and all that. I didn't see them. I did see one guy who had a sign. He was from the Harriet Tubman Center, which is a Marxiste formation. It's the Workers' World Party. The LA branch was kicked out or split or whatever. So they struggle la lucha. They have the Harriet Tubman Center. It's like a small little office. I saw a guy with the Harriet Tubman Center sign. He was handing out stuff for the Harriet Tubman Center. That was about it. Yeah. In terms of communists, very few communists. Again, years ago, one of these demonstrations would have been all communists. But nowadays, communism is so confused and all of that. Whatever. And we were there, but we weren't handing out CPI stuff. We were there, and it was good to see John. It was good to see Joey. It was good to see Ishmael. Shout out to all of you. Glad you were there. It was dangerous, and thanks, guys. For being there. It was risky. We with the tear gas and all that, we got out of there at exactly the right time. If we had stayed a little bit longer, we'd probably be sitting in a holding cell right now at the very least, or at least have had gotten tear gassed pretty bad. So wait till you see the video. We got a lot of amazing video from here in LA. So there you go. A lot of great stuff is happening. But anyway, we got more Rumble rants. Phil, if you want to clarify what your question is a little bit more, maybe you want to signal message me or whatever. I don't quite understand your Cash App question, Phil. So yeah, go ahead. But anyway, all right. So that's John. Tulsi Gabbard did an excellent video on a horrible nuclear war. I saw that video and I shared it. I thought it was really, really good. And that's like, so why, I don't know. Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard, it was a very, very good video that she made about the dangers of nuclear war. And then would it be correct to say the American years of lead will begin with the first Trump administration or later? Okay, well, it's not about, see, the point when I'm talking about the years of lead, it's not about saying, well, this is the American years of lead. The point is that the years of lead prevented Italy from leaving NATO. That's the point. That's the point, is that the years of lead prevented Italy from leaving NATO. The Italian public wanted to leave NATO. The Communist Party was growing in popularity. Many Italian social democrats wanted to leave NATO. Many Italian nationalists on the right wanted to leave NATO. And the way Italy was kept in NATO was by the CIA, with Operation Gladio, fomented all kinds of crazy political violence. And with their crazy political violence, the Italian public was overruled, and they created an atmosphere where people were afraid of getting shot. There was so much political violence that the population became demoralized and weary, and Italy stayed in NATO. And the point is that violence in and of itself is not helpful, right? And that, if you think the answer is violence, look, Italy, they had loads of violence, and it made things, it ultimately was how they they diffused and controlled dissent, right? And that this is a strategy, and it was done in Jamaica during the 1980s. They had a very similar thing in the 70s and 80s in Jamaica, when you had Michael Manley, who was elected, who was an anti-imperialist, and then they fomented all kinds of crazy political violence, and Jamaica never became a fully anti-imperialist country. And the way the provisional IRA was defeated in Northern Ireland was by fomenting all kinds of crazy political violence, with counter gangs and with, Ulster separatists and Ulster unionists, and that the idea that violence is revolutionary and that what we need now is more violence is wrong. Okay, it's just wrong. And like what happened out here today on the streets of LA, this didn't have to happen. I don't know who the people driving by with throwing the explosives out of the cars were. I don't know who they were. They could have been police. They could have been federal people. I don't know who they were, but they didn't help, and that didn't have to happen today, right? And the crowd was overwhelmingly peaceful, all right, and then all of a sudden some explosions start going off, and then rubber bullets are flying and tear gas, and they diffused the rally. A peaceful rally was diffused by escalating to violence, right? And that, what you might call a premature escalation to armed struggle is a very good way to destroy a mass movement. And we saw that on a small scale here in LA, right? It was a largely peaceful rally that was big, and it escalated to violence, and that diffused it. That's what ended it, right? And if it hadn't escalated to people throwing explosives, and those people throwing the explosives very well could have been agent provocateurs. They're driving by really fast in their cars, just throwing these, bombs out the windows, and then all of a sudden that we got to get out of the mindset that violence in and of itself is revolutionary. It is not, right? It is not. And, and that, like, the glorification of Luigi Mangione, the point that I made in my book over and over and over again is Medicare for all marches, Nazi, fascist, racist, unacceptable. Force the vote, a parliamentary procedure. Jimmy Dore called for it. Nazi, racist, fascist. But then an isolated act of murder, that's okay? Explain that to me. Why is the very same liberal voices that demonized Medicare for all marches, that demonized force the vote, why are they celebrating an isolated act of murder? Because they want to create an atmosphere in American politics where people are afraid to get active because they don't want to get killed. That's what happened in Italy, right? The death count of the years of lead was like 400 some, but it was much larger, and much more people got shot in their legs, right? And didn't get killed. They just got crippled for life, because apparently that's a tradition in Italy. They call it like kneecapping or something like that. And so one thing that the communists, the Red Brigades, and the fascist groups would do is they would shoot people in their legs and cripple them for life. And there were thousands of people that were crippled for life during the years of lead. And right now, it's hard to get people to come to political stuff, because of all the internet mudslinging and all of that. And it's demoralizing. Well, imagine people were afraid of getting shot and killed, right? It would be much worse, right? And that's what a premature escalation, a glorification of political violence will lead to. It will lead to a situation where everyone's just sick and tired. Everyone knows the situation is corrupt, but they feel powerless and they're afraid to get involved because they don't want to get killed. That's what it's going to lead to. We don't want that situation, and it creates a negative, pessimistic, vengeful atmosphere. We don't need that, right? Years of lead is the last thing America needs right now. We need an optimistic mass movement celebrating human creativity, celebrating human brilliance, marching into the future. That's what we need. That is what we need. All right, Phil, you sent a question. Are there any parallels in world history to what is currently happening with Trump's Bonapartism from the wrong side and Israel's unprovoked attack on Iran? And what can modern day learn from these past events with how to better navigate them? Well, there's certainly a number of examples of Israel doing very provocative things. Israel attacked Iraq in 1981, murdered a French citizen at the Iraqi nuclear power plant facility. And the USA knew about it, but the USA condemned it at the time, but the USA knew about it and supported it. And there's certainly been situations where, we've come close to nuclear war. There was the Flight 007 incident. There was the Cuban Missile Crisis. What is unique about this situation is that Iran, an anti-imperialist country, has the ability to retaliate very dramatically. And it has nuclear powers on its side, right, that are willing to defend it. That's what makes this situation so dangerous and unique, right? In the past, yes, there's been many examples of the USA kind of, attacking a country in an unprovoked way and the world expressing outrage about it. But in this situation, the forces have the ability to push back and are threatening to push back as they never would before. No, I mean, there's many examples. From what I understand, Ronald Reagan's invasion of Grenada, right? So what happened was that, Hezbollah, right, killed a number of U.S. Marines. They blew up a U.S. military base in Lebanon, right? And they killed like 240 Marines. It was a very devastating attack. So then shortly afterwards, Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada. He just picked a country, an anti-imperialist country at the time. Grenada had a government that was like starting to lean toward Cuba. And he thought, okay, I can't really fight in the Middle East, but in order to like get everyone to see America as strong and powerful again, he invaded Grenada, as a kind of a show of strength after the USA was kind of humiliated by Hezbollah, that blew up the military base. That was in the 1980s. What year was that? It was in the early 80s. I think that was in Reagan's first term that the U.S. invasion of Grenada happened. It's interesting because there were a number of Americans who were in Grenada at the time. When I was in the Workers' World Party, I actually met people who lived in Grenada when the invasion happened and were very traumatized by that whole experience. And it was kind of out of nowhere. Ronald Reagan just announced, and it was something about like medical students were being mistreated. It was the most bizarre thing. Like out of nowhere, Ronald Reagan said, there's some medical students in Grenada that are being mistreated. And he invaded and overthrew the government of Grenada. And there had also been kind of a weird two-line struggle going on in Grenada at the time. It was like there was like some kind of like ultra-left faction, like Trotskyite group that was against the leader, that was like calling itself more genuinely Marxist-Leninist. And it looked like it was almost like the CIA strategy had been to divide the Grenadan communists, right? There was like a ultra-revolutionary group, and there was a group that was like more reformist or whatever, and they were fighting with each other, and the CIA wanted to manipulate the differences. And then Reagan just said, you know what, I'm just going to invade. And they invaded. And it was almost a PR move because the military and the United States was kind of humiliated by the bombing of in Lebanon. And so to like just demonstrate U.S. strength, they invaded Grenada. And that there was, I talk about the late Cold War. And this is, again, when I talk about the years of lead, right? So at the same time that in Jamaica, in the 70s and 80s, you had all this senseless political violence being fomented in order to prevent like a real revolutionary movement from taking power. Same time in Italy, you had the years of lead. The years of lead were a little bit earlier, but it's the same period, 60s, 70s, and 80s. But in the late Cold War, you also had a lot of weird provocations where, like, for example, in Angola, the CIA tried to overthrow the Marxist government of Angola they found a general in the Angolan military who called himself an anti-revisionist, who called himself a hardline Marxist-Leninist. And he seized power and he seized control of the TV stations in Angola. And he said that he was a real communist. And he said that Cuba supported him and the Soviets supported him. And he denounced Dos Santos, the leader, and he tried to seize power. And his whole thing was he was saying, I'm a real communist. And he said, the Soviets support me and the Cubans support me. They didn't. It was CIA. And the Cubans got the message from Cuba, no, we don't support this guy. And the Soviets, no, we don't support this guy. But it was, there was an attempted coup in Angola by a general who was actually being covertly backed by the United States. But in messaging, right, the Angolan government was downplaying its communist messaging, trying to kind of appease the United States. British Petroleum was still there, and they were negotiating with BP, et cetera. The Angolan government was trying to downplay it. So the CIA found this guy who sounded like he was a super revolutionary, And he tried to pull off a coup. It's a very strange situation. There was something like that going on in Grenada at the time that the USA invaded Grenada. There was, these kind of things are very strange. And the late Cold War, that was the whole thing. After the USA was defeated in Vietnam, Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger reinvented U.S. foreign policy. And instead of having big dramatic wars where we invade countries with mass bombing like Vietnam, like Korea, what they did is they learned the art of stepping back and playing communist groups against each other and playing different anti-imperialists against each other. And in Iraq, you had Ba'athist Arab socialism. In Iran, you had Shia Islamic revolutionary ideology. And both of these movements, let's be real, I'll just be real with you, both of those movements at various times got CIA support against communism, right? Now, they're both revolutionary anti-imperialist movements, but Ba'athist Arab socialism, at various times, the CIA thought that was an alternative to Marxism-Leninism, and Shia Islamic revolutionary, at various times, the USA thought that Khomeini was better than the communists. Both of those were anti-imperialist movements that had gotten U.S. support at various times, and they both took power, and they both were becoming anti-imperialist. Khomeini moved Iran in a revolutionary anti-imperialist direction, and Ba'athist Arab socialism moved Iraq in an anti-imperialist direction. So both of them were anti-imperialists who had gotten some U.S. support before. They took power, and then the USA played them against each other. And the USA backed Iraq against Iran in the early 80s. And then in the late 80s, the USA flipped and started supporting Iran against Iraq, right? And they played these two forces against each other. Right. And, there was the 1978, the Kampuchea War, where, the Vietnamese communists went to war with the Cambodian communists. And then China invaded Vietnam to support the Cambodian communists. And that, it was a mess. And that was more the strategies. Instead of having big dramatic wars that have huge body counts, let's manipulate the communists against each other. Let's manipulate these anti-imperialist forces. Let's kind of stand back and then secretly give guns and weapons to some and secretly pretend to negotiate and be friendly to some and let's just stand back and manipulate them, right? And that's what I argue in my speech at the event in Russia. That's what I argued was happening in social media. They've given up trying to have imperialist dominance over the media. So what they're doing is they're boosting different anti-establishment voices and suppressing others, and they're manipulating different anti-establishment forces against each other. They've given up. They're not going to be able to just dominate the discourse and say, either you agree with the New York Times or you're a crazy conspiracy. They can't do that anymore. So they have all kinds of different dissidents from all kinds of different perspectives, and they boost some and they suppress others, and it's a game that they're playing, right? Of how can they manipulate manipulate the various anti-imperialist forces and create enough confusion that the establishment narrative just wins by default. That's what they're trying to do. It's very similar to the late Cold War. It's very similar to the years of lead, right? It's that they don't have the ability to just roll in and smash dissident forces as they once did. So now they're playing a game. They're playing a manipulative game where they boost some, they suppress others. It's a game that they're playing. And that's how we should understand this. And that's why we need to get off the internet, because the internet, you don't know who any of these people are, right? You don't know who any of these people are. And, and that there's a game that is played, and we need to build a real organization. You know what the real organization is and what we're doing. And that's what needs to be understood, right? Is that's the game that they're playing, is that they boost various people who don't agree with the mainstream narrative in a manipulative way to weaken the whole movement. That's what they're doing right now. Right. And I could go into great detail about that, but I'm not going to. Okay. What's next? Why are so-called communists hostile to Christianity and theocratic Islam, but take no issue with other religions? Is this wokeism? That's a good question. I'll take it apart. First of all, right, let's just be real, right? Communism as a movement was anti-Christian because Christianity was viewed as the old order, right? Marxism's roots are in the French revolutionary tradition. The word left comes from the National Assembly in France. The people that were still loyal to the king sat on the right. The Jacobins, the revolutionaries, sat on the left. That's where the words come from, left and right. Marxism was a left movement that viewed the king and feudalism and the Catholic Church as the main enemy, and they were in favor of science and reason, etc. And it was that aesthetic of rebellion, and you see that goes all through. Karl Marx, he called himself a Promethean. He admired Prometheus. Now, who is Prometheus? Prometheus is the Greek character who stole fire from the gods and gave humanity the ability to make fire by rebelling against the gods, and was sentenced to eternal torment, being eternally pecked apart by birds for doing that. And Karl Marx called himself a Promethean because he was in rebellion against the gods. He was in favor of human reason and all of that. Well, I'm in favor of human reason and science. I just don't see that as in opposition to God. But that was Marx's view, right? Is that religion is kind of a restraint that weakens people. He's a rebel. And there's like poems that Marx wrote as a teenager that are very anti-religious, celebrating human reason and science. That's kind of the Marxist tradition, right? Is that, that we are in rebellion. The Marxist tradition is in rebellion against religious institutions because it sees religious institutions as oppressive. It's celebrating humanity and human reason. It views the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church or even the Protestant Church as upholding feudalism, upholding the old order. That's kind of the traditional Marxist way of viewing things. Now, in America, it takes on a little bit of a different connotation because in America, religion is considered to be right-wing. Now, why? Because during the Bush year, especially during the 70s and 80s, there was a real push for religion, kind of the new, what they called the religious right. Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Billy Graham, it was kind of, being religious became associated with being conservative, which it wasn't always, right? Historically, Roman Catholics were Democrats, right? John F. Kennedy was a Democrat who was very against abortion. Gay marriage wasn't even discussed back then, but he was very against abortion. And, Catholics tended overwhelmingly to vote for Democrats because they viewed Republicans as anti-Catholic, and they lived in urban areas, and they were cops and firemen, Irish, Italian. And, the Democrats, deeply religious, conservative Catholics who were against birth control, right? The first birth control clinic that was opened in New York City by Margaret Sanger was burned down by a mob of Irish people. But they were all Democrats, right? And the deeply religious Catholics in America historically are Democrats because they're a religious minority, because they live in an urban area, and that, deeply Catholic principles like opposing birth control, like opposing abortion were considered Democratic Party. And in fact, if you go back to the early 70s and 60s, Republicans tended to be more in favor of abortion for Malthusian reasons. They would argue the poor people have too many babies. And they would say that, we need more abortion because the poor people, we should encourage birth control and abortion among poor people. And, that was a big argument. A lot of conservatives felt that, that Black people, had too many children. And that was a big put, the Planned Parenthood, when it was started, there was a Ku Klux Klan member, a guy named Lothrop Stoddard, who was on the board of Planned Parenthood. He was a KKK member and a white supremacist and a conservative. And he was on the board of Planned Parenthood because he believed that we needed to breed out inferior people and that he wanted poor people to stop reproducing. So, politics is very weird like that, right? Now, generally in America, Republicans tend to be the party of the rural people. Democrats tend to be the party of the urban people. Now, that tells you very little, right? Because during the Civil War era, the rural people were what you might call the left. They were more radical. They were called free soilers, right? And the Republican Party, when it began, its slogan was free land, free labor, free men. They were against slavery. They were against the big corporations. They were rural populists, and they were deeply religious. John Brown, the Second Great Awakening, they were fanatical Protestants. They wanted to outlaw alcohol. They were against drinking alcohol, and they wanted to redistribute the land, and they wanted to nationalize the railways, and they wanted to, get rid of the gold standard and replace it with the silver standard. The populists, right? The populists and the Lincoln era Republican Party that eventually became the Populist Party was the party of rural poor people, rural small farmers who were Protestant. Right? The Democrats have always been the party of the urban political machines, the Tammany Hall machine in New York City, the Rizzo machine in Philadelphia, the Daley machine in Chicago, like these corrupt urban machines, which in many cases were conservative because they were controlled by big money and they were corrupt, right? And that, there were so many poor people and recent immigrants in urban areas, the elections were completely rigged. They would just pay people to go vote. The elections in urban areas, there was not, they were just completely controlled, and, the cities were where the big sweatshops were, et cetera. And so, the Democrats were the conservative party of corrupt urban political machines and the Jim Crow South. The Republican Party was the party of small farmers and rural people who were radical and anti-slavery, but in the name of their religion. And they were also kind of socially conservative. They didn't believe in drinking alcohol. As you get later in American politics, that begins to shift. And really, the Roosevelt era is the most dramatic shift. But what happened is, Lincoln was a revolutionary. Lincoln was against slavery. Lincoln aligned himself with Karl Marx and with the labor unions, et cetera, defeated slavery. And after Lincoln's death, the Republican Party split. The Republican Party was divided between the moderate Republicans that were in favor of imperialism and what they called the radical Republicans that were opposed to American imperialism and that wanted to continue redistributing land in the South, et cetera. And the radical Republicans became the populists and the People's Party. And they were the party that wanted to continue the Civil War, redistribute land, wanted to empower Black people, was also opposed to U.S. military expansionism, et cetera. The radical Republicans became the populists. However, and the Democratic Party was the party that was, against Lincoln, right? They thought the Civil War was a disaster. It was the Gone with the Wind. I do declare, Captain Butler. It was that party, the corrupt urban machines and the racists in the South. And they let Confederate soldiers get their voting rights back. They all, that's where the Pledge of Allegiance comes from. They had to, vote. They had to take an oath of loyalty to the country. They got their voting rights back. And then the Republican Party, after the populists left, they pulled the troops out of the South. And so the South became Democrat territory again. And then among the populists, racism started to become popular, right? The populists were originally against racism. However, the Democrats would frequently play the racism card against the Republicans. And they would talk about Black people getting federal jobs. Oh, they're not giving jobs to you. They're giving jobs to Black people, right? And that the Democrats started using populist rhetoric mixed in with racism. And so the Populist Party ultimately dissolved into the Democrats because of William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan was a Democrat, but his history was as a populist. And he preached against the big banks and he preached against the gold standard. And William Jennings Bryan, he became the Democratic Party nominee, and he basically brought the populist movement into the Democratic Party. And in order to do that, the populist movement had to embrace racism because the Democratic Party was the party of Jim Crow. So economic populism went from the Republican Party to the Populist Party, and then it embraced racism and went into the Democratic Party. And, the reformers and the muckrakers of the early 1900s, Ida Tarbell and people like that, they were racist, right? They were in favor of workers' rights. Some of them wanted a national health care service, but they also believed in eugenics because, breeding people is scientific. They claimed, and there was a lot of what you call the progressives that were kind of left in that they were criticizing big business. They were, in favor of getting rid of sweatshops. They talked about workers' rights. They also had this weird racist side because they thought racism was scientific, right? So you had all of that. Woodrow Wilson was the progressive president. He was a Democrat and he was elected, and he was considered a progressive, but he was really racist, super racist. And he was a college professor. He was like super smart, but he was super racist or whatever. And then he ultimately brought the USA into World War I. And he was, the Democratic Party was very weak. The progressives, the Democratic Party was weak. So Woodrow Wilson formed the Ku Klux Klan. He revived the Ku Klux Klan as a way to strengthen the Democratic Party, to recruit small farmers, rural Midwestern people to be Democrats. He formed the KKK, right? The rural people tended to be Republicans. But by forming this mass racist movement, that was a way to get the rural people back into the Democratic Party. And the Ku Klux Klan kind of took control of the Democratic Party. And after Woodrow Wilson's presidency in 1924, the Democratic Party nearly fell apart because of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan held the Democratic Party captive. 1924, you had the longest national convention in American history when the Ku Klux Klan basically prevented the Democratic Party from nominating a candidate. It was called the Klan Bake. It was in New York City. And the KKK, which was this kind of invention of the progressives. It was Woodrow Wilson and these kind of like, economically left people that were very wealthy in New England, right? It was people like that. They kind of created the KKK as a way to recruit, low income people to their party, and it was, whatever. So the Democratic Party was the party of the KKK. It was a party with like a left economic message, but a super socially conservative and super racist message. That was the Democratic Party. Then the Great Depression hit, and Roosevelt took office, and Roosevelt became a Bonapartist, right? And Roosevelt aligned himself with the labor movement. And the labor movement was very popular in the urban areas. And the labor movement was largely in opposition to the urban political machines. And so the urban political machines turned against Roosevelt, and they formed the American Liberty League. The leader of the American Liberty League was Al Smith. Al Smith was a Democrat. I think he was the Democrat nominee for president in 1928. And he was this well-known Democrat in New York City who was Roman Catholic, and he hated Roosevelt, and he thought Roosevelt was a communist. And so the urban political machines that were Democratic turned against Roosevelt, and Roosevelt embraced the labor unions, which were fighting the urban political machines, and he also helped the farmers. Roosevelt did a lot to help farmers. I mean, he brought electrification to the countryside. He did a lot. He had a lot of programs to help farmers. So Roosevelt, the Democratic Party of Roosevelt, is really, when we think of the Democratic Party as being, quote, a left party, right? Roosevelt was fighting the urban political machines, and even Roosevelt himself wouldn't challenge Jim Crow, but his wife would. Eleanor Roosevelt would oppose Jim Crow. And the Communist Party and the labor movement were part of the Roosevelt coalition. And the Communist Party was anti-racist and for the rights of Black people. And so really the beginning of the Democratic Party being what you might call a left party is really in the Roosevelt years, right? The Democratic Party was never really influenced by Marxism or anything like that until the Roosevelt era. Whereas, people that were very opposed to communism, conservatives, then became Republicans because Roosevelt was seen as sympathetic to the communists. And after World War II, McCarthyism begins with the urban political machines retaking the Democrat Party and expelling the Roosevelt coalition. And Henry Wallace, who was the vice president under Roosevelt, is kicked out of the Democrat Party. He forms the Progressive Party. And the Kennedy family is really heavily involved. They're urban Catholics. They're from the Boston political machine. They're very heavily involved in setting up the House Un-American Activities Committee. And it's the Democrats, the urban political machines, and the Catholic trade union associations, the Roman Catholic Trade Union Association, trade union members that are Roman Catholic, largely push the Roosevelt wing of the Democrat Party out. And they expel the Communist Party from the labor unions, and they push the Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party out of power. But then the Republicans start to gain the upper hand because they start accusing Truman of being soft on communism. They say, who lost China? The fact that in 1949, China has a communist revolution. They blame Harry Truman for that. And they play up the idea that Roosevelt gave Eastern Europe to Stalin. And so the Republicans start accusing the Democrats of being soft on communism. So the Democrats are on the defensive saying that they're against communism. And if you're really against communism, you're a Republican, right? And then you have, McCarthyism really escalates. That's when you get Eisenhower becomes a Republican president. But then, starting after the death of Stalin, with the rise of Khrushchev, you get Cold War liberalism, and McCarthyism is viewed as dangerous. And you have the administration of John F. Kennedy, you have the administration of Lyndon Johnson, and out of that period, right? Out of the ebbing of McCarthyism, to push back against McCarthyism, the new left emerges, Students for a Democratic Society, and the modern civil rights movement. Barry Goldwater and the conservatives are viewed as nutty, dangerous conservatives, and the Ford Foundation and a lot of money is being thrown into left activism that eventually they lose control of, right? And it leads to the Black liberation movement in the Black community. It leads to what you might call, it leads to Students for a Democratic Society and the New Left and all of that. So the Republican Party kind of reinvents itself with the rise of Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon becomes friends with Reverend Billy Graham. And Reverend Billy Graham is just a well-known evangelist who actually led a big Christian revival in Britain in the 1950s. Is it from North Carolina, but he goes to Britain and he's a big preacher in Britain and leads this kind of religious Christian revival movement in Britain in the 1950s. He comes back to the United States and he does these TV broadcasts about becoming a Christian, evangelical, like Baptist, kind of born again kind of stuff. And Richard Nixon realizes that part of the reason conservatives are losing out is because religion is a big part of conservatism, social conservatism. And the New Left is all about, married, people, unmarried couples living together and the birth control pill and drugs and all of that. So religion needs kind of a reinvention. So Billy Graham starts having what they call Jesus freaks on his broadcast. Billy Graham does these broadcasts where he just preaches, and they show them on national television. He preaches sermons. But even though Billy Graham is a conservative, he's, whatever, he starts having hippie rock music performers play their guitars and do the hippie thing as a way of kind of recruiting young people. And Richard Nixon, his spiritual advisor, is Billy Graham. And that's kind of the beginning of what you call the religious right in America, is Billy Graham's broadcasts. And then it appears that in the early 70s, there were a number of religious groups that were Christian. It gets very weird. So part of the New Left, and this is where it gets weird, part of the New Left was Eastern mysticism. Right? The Hare Krishna movement and various gurus from India were brought in to recruit the young people who were going to anti-war protests, right? I think, what's his name? Osho, right? Osho or Bhagwan or whatever his name was. That guy is a guru. He's anti-communist, right? He's against the Vietnam War. He's recruiting young hippies, but he says communism is bad. And the liberal CIA had this relationship with Indian mystics, the Dalai Lama, and Tibetan Buddhism, and they were doing their thing. And they had all these kind of like new religious movements that were not Christian, that were recruiting hippies. And it was a way to like nudge them away from communism. That was the New Left. So Richard Nixon realizes the New Left has so much power. So he then starts building his own movements that are anti-communist, that are also, intelligence linked, right? And that's where you get the rise of, Richard Nixon very famously, befriended the Unification Church, and he brought the Unification Church to the United States as kind of, they were anti-communist and they were recruiting young hippies or whatever, but they were conservatives. They were like Nixon conservatives. They weren't against the Vietnam War. You have, what's his name? The pastor, the guy who was here in LA, who was a Beatles promoter. What was his name? I cannot remember his name. But there were a number of these groups that kind of set up shop, that they were like the CIA, the liberal CIA had brought the Eastern mystics to the United States. So Richard Nixon started bringing like Christian revival movements that were aligned with him, that were thoroughly anti-communist. There's the guy, Tony Alamo, that's his name, Reverend Tony Alamo. And he recruited a lot of LA hippies. And you had like, the Jesus freaks, they called them, were like Christian hippies. They were kind of the opening through which Richard Nixon could recruit young people to be conservatives again. And you had, a couple different groups that were recruiting Jesus freaks. And then 78, 79, you just had a full pullout. You had Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, and you had the moral majority, and you just had a full pullout where the U.S. and the military in particular, the U.S. Armed Forces, they were just kind of pushing Protestant revival Christianity as part of what it meant to be a neocon, a neoconservatism. A big part of neoconservatism was Protestant revival Christianity. Anyway, Deha, this is a long way of explaining that basically a lot of what young quote unquote communists have is they hate conservatives. They hate anything associated with being a conservative. And in American culture, since the 70s, right? So really since the Nixon era, but really escalating in the Reagan, late, 78, 79, part of the Reagan years, being a Christian and being a conservative are seen as almost synonymous. Okay. So because of that, if you have Trump derangement syndrome, you almost have Christian derangement syndrome also, which is nuts. That doesn't make any sense, right? But that's just kind of how it is. That if you know, and you know, in a lot of these communist groups, they have Trump derangement syndrome. So it's like automatic that they must have Christ derangement syndrome also. They see a Bible and they think, oh my God, and it's like Trump derangement syndrome and Christian derangement syndrome go hand in hand. That's why these groups are the way they are. It doesn't make any sense. And it's just kind of how our politics is aligned. And one thing that I pointed out in my book, Where is America Going, which is published in Chinese. They're going to do the big rollout of my book, Where is America Going, in July. The Chinese edition is going to be rolled out in July, but I already have a copy of the Chinese edition of my book. It took a long time to get it translated, but I'm very excited about it. But one thing I pointed out is that during Trump's first term, they really tried to create a religious left in America, and it flopped. It absolutely flopped. It was one of the most miserable failures. And the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, oh, the day of the religious left is coming. It was a complete flop because it was fake. It was paid for, right? It was all this foundation money. They give a transgender pastor, oh, look at this transgender pastor who's starting a church, and they do a story about him in the local newspaper, and the church would go out of business in a couple of months because no one wanted to go there. It all just had this fake quality. There was no passion behind it, right? The religious left, that was one of the biggest failures that I've ever seen, is they tried to create woke Christianity during Trump's first term, and it flopped. It just completely flopped because there was no passion behind it. There was no belief, right? Religion without passion is a recipe for disaster, right? And that, there were all these people getting Soros money or whatever to open their woke church. It just didn't work, right? A lot of the more mainline churches that are seeing their attendance decline, they're getting weaker. A lot of them, started doing more woke stuff. But in terms of, was there a big woke Christian movement? Didn't happen, right? Some of the more liberal mainline churches started being more political. That's what came out of it, right? You see a lot of churches that have a rainbow flag outside, that have a BLM thing. Those churches aren't growing. They're just becoming more political than they used to be. That's all that's going on. But in terms of, the religious left, it was one of the biggest failures because, and that's the problem. It's the same problem that they don't want to fund anyone that has any real beliefs, right? If you are genuine in what you believe, right? If you will never get Soros money, right? And if you genuinely believe in what you're doing, if you're a sincere, dedicated person, you'll never go viral and you'll never get Soros money, right? The internet, I swear it is the weirdest thing, but you're a libertarian. If you genuinely believe in libertarianism, if you are a true libertarianism, you'll never go viral and your libertarianism will never be funded by George Soros. And if you're a true woke leftist, but you actually believe in what you're saying and you are sincere, you will never go viral and you will never get funding for your woke activism. And if you're a conservative and you actually believe in what you're saying and you believe in what you're saying and you're sincere in what you're saying, you're never going to get funded and you're never going to go viral. They hate sincere people. It is that simple. If you actually believe in anything, if you're not just a stupid shill, if you're not somebody who's just very easily manipulated by, oh, how many likes am I getting? I better say this. I want to get the likes. If you're not easily manipulated, if you have firm principles and you actually believe in something, they're never going to write you a check to fund your movement. They're never going to do that. And they're never going to make you go viral, no matter what you believe, right? And it's that simple, right? If you're a fraud and you call yourself a libertarian and you'll do what they say and they'll make you go viral and they'll pump money into you. If you're a fraud and you call yourself a conservative, they'll pump money into you. They'll make you go viral. If you're a fraud and you call yourself a communist, they'll pump money into you and they'll make you go viral. But if you are sincere, if you have genuine principles that you believe in, you're not just chasing the likes, chasing the Patreon money. If you are actually sincere, you'll never get funding. And that is why we have to just build an in real life movement, a movement that recruits people who would never go looking for this, not an internet niche. We have to build a real movement among the people, because the way it's set up is that you will never go viral and you'll never get widely promoted if you are sincere. And I will work with sincere libertarians, and I will work with sincere conservatives, and I will work with sincere communists, and I will work with sincere leftists. But I'm just telling you that it's almost a spiritual question. Satan hates sincerity, right? The satanic liberal order hates sincerity. if you can be a libertarian as long as you're not sincere, right? As long as you don't really want to end the wars, as long as you don't really want to stop the police state, oh, they'll fund you to be a libertarian. You can be a communist as long as you don't stand up for Uhuru and you don't stand in solidarity with Russia and China and Iran. Oh yeah, they'll fund you to be a communist. You can be a conservative as long as you don't, really want to put America first and end the wars. As long as you don't really want to protect our civil liberties. Oh yeah, they'll promote you. But if you are sincere and you actually stick to your principles, you will never go viral and they'll never fund you, right? Gavin, you hit the nail on the head. In my book on Khrushchevism, I talk about true believers, right? That they published this book, The True Believer. That's what they're against. They're against true believers, right? Khrushchevism. True believers are the problem. That's what they're against. They're against people that are at all sincere. They want shills. They want people that are cynical. They want people that can be easily manipulated. They don't like people who have sincere beliefs and work for what they believe in. And if you have sincere beliefs, you have to be against the wars. You have to be against what they're doing. Every sincere libertarian has to be opposed to going to war to protect Israel, right? And every sincere conservative has to be opposed to going to war with Iran to protect Israel. And every sincere communist has to be opposed to it, right? So if you are sincere, right? If you are sincere, you're going to be against what they're doing. If you're sincere, you're going to want to protect our civil liberties. If you're sincere, you're going to want economic growth and expansion. And basically all these ideologies, they disagree about why, but they all kind of want the same thing. And the liberal order doesn't want that. The liberal order is anti-human. The liberal order is anti-growth. The liberal order is pro-war and pro-police state. And if you are sincere in anything, you're going to oppose the liberal order. And that's why sincere people don't get promoted. And so the only hope for sincere people is we can use technology to communicate, to stay in touch with people. We got to build an in real life movement. All right. So I see Gabby, you sent a super question. What's the question, Gabby? Send me a signal message with the question. I'd be happy to answer the question. So there you go. Gabby, send me a signal message with your question. I appreciate the Cash App. Thank you. All right. What else we got here? Deha, was that the last question? No. John McPee says, it's funny that the last season of Star Wars Andor, the Empire tricks the rebels into prematurely escalating to armed struggle and defeats them. That's interesting. Is that the Return of the Jedi? Is that what happens? Or I've seen Return of the Jedi, and that has the Ewoks and Endor and all that. But maybe you're referring to another spin-off or something. I don't know what you're referring to there, but there we go. Yeah, I don't think I've seen Star Wars Andor. I haven't seen that, right? I have, but it's true. Well, and I mean, that used to be something that was widely understood, is that the bosses want you to escalate to violence so they can repress you. Since you know the history of politics, you need to make a contemporary version of Orson Welles' book, record, The Begetting of the President. Well, let me Google that. I know Orson Welles, right? The radio personality. He did Citizen Kane. But what's The Begetting of the President? What is that? I'm Googling it. The Begetting of the President is a satirical album narrated by Orson Welles, summarizing the presidency of Lyndon Johnson. I should listen to that sometime. That sounds like it would be very, very funny. That sounds like it would be kind of hilarious. I enjoy Orson Welles, and Citizen Kane is a good movie. But there you go. Won't ruin the ending for you. I was a little disappointed by the ending, but that's the point. You're supposed to be disappointed by the ending, right? He made the ending disappointing to, Rosebud, right? I don't want to give the ending away, but yeah. So, man, Orson Welles was involved in, there was the National Theater Project of the United States was shut down because they did a communist musical called The Cradle Will Rock, written by Mark Blitzstein, who was a Communist Party member. And it was a pro-labor musical about, steel workers going on strike. And Orson Welles was part of that. And they shut down the theater project because of that. Orson Welles was a progressive person. And his film Citizen Kane is an attack on a far-right, like fascist. It was, what's his name? The media mogul who was pro-fascism, the right-wing, what was his name? my goodness, Hearst, William Randolph Hearst. That's who the film is supposed to be about. It's like a fictionalized account of the life of William Randolph Hearst, the yellow journalist. And William Randolph Hearst, let me just throw this out there, right? William Randolph Hearst was the tabloid owner. He owned all kinds of newspapers, and he was a real anti-communist and conservative. And he was also a promoter of Leon Trotsky. No one ever talks about this, but the Journal American, which was the newspaper of William Randolph Hearst, paid Leon Trotsky to write anti-Soviet articles against Stalin. William Randolph Hearst, his newspapers promoted Hitler, and they promoted the Nazis, and they also promoted Trotsky. And there was a whole issue of the Journal American, Why the Soviet Union Will Fall, by Leon Trotsky. And William Randolph Hearst subsidized and promoted Trotsky against the Soviet Union. Little known fact. And Trotsky wanted to actually testify before the Dies Committee, the House Un-American Activities Committee. It was called the Dies Committee of Martin Dies, and they were investigating Roosevelt for his ties to the Communist Party. And so they called Trotsky to be a witness, and Trotsky agreed that he would testify before the Dies Committee. Now they eventually rescinded their request, but Trotsky, the fascists liked Trotsky. Even though Trotsky claimed he was anti-fascist or whatever, William Randolph Hearst published Trotsky's writings, and the Martin Dies Committee that was accusing Roosevelt of being a communist dictator, a king, right? They wanted to bring Trotsky as a friendly witness to testify against the Communist Party and against their alliance with Roosevelt. A little known fact. And of course, Patty Hearst, right, the daughter of William Randolph Hearst, she was kidnapped by a strange group of Maoist radicals, the Symbionese Liberation Army. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down. It's a very strange story that we can talk about another time on this stream. We don't have time for that tonight, but because William Randolph Hearst was this far right anti-communist, a group of Maoist communists in the Bay Area kidnapped his daughter from college, and she ended up joining them and robbing banks with them and going to prison. It was a very strange story about Stockholm syndrome and all. Very strange. All right. And I believe that's all the questions. But Gabby had a question. She sent a question. I don't get all the outrage about Trump and ICE. I thought he was just trying to deport criminals, not random people. What's the real issue? Well, it looks to me like there is a legal problem. That there are people that are being sent to El Salvador that are U.S. citizens. They just say you're a member of a gang and they're deporting them. It looks like these people that are accused of being members of gangs, just because they have a tattoo, they're being sent to El Salvador, and they don't ever have an opportunity to say, I'm not a member of the gang. And that there's no due process, right? That because people have a tattoo, or whatever, they're just saying, oh, you're a part of this gang and you get sent to El Salvador and you have no opportunity to defend yourself. There are some very legit questions, I think. Sending people to El Salvador, having prison camps in El Salvador, that's not something we should be doing. And also, if you get deported from the United States, you generally have due process. You have the right to say, well, I should be you have hearings, etc. And that's not being done. So, there are things that are being done by ICE that are not constitutional. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with Trump derangement syndrome, but I don't agree with what Trump is doing with ICE, and I don't think someone should be kicked out of the country because of a tattoo or because they support the Palestinians, and I don't think someone should be sent to a prison camp in El Salvador if they're not from El Salvador, right? If someone's illegally in the country from El Salvador, you can send them back to El Salvador, but you can't, if somebody's from Mexico, you can't send them to El Salvador. That's not legal, right? And you especially can't send them there because they have a tattoo. And if you're sending them to El Salvador because you say they're a member of a gang, you need to let them argue that they are not a member of a gang. They ought to have a day in court, right? You ought to have, proceedings where they're allowed to argue that they are or they aren't a member of the gang. There's a lot of what Trump is doing. Look, I don't object to Trump going after the gangs. I have no problem. I have no love for MS-13, right? I have no love for these criminal organizations, and I will never belittle what these groups are doing. But, but at the same time, we do have due process in this country, and that, Obama rolled back due process, killed a U.S. citizen with a drone with no trial or anything. Bush did the indefinite detention, and that Trump seems to be continuing that. And that part of Trump not following due process is his, in the name of fighting these gangs, ICE has violated some of the constitutional procedures that are in place to protect people's civil liberties. I don't agree with that. So that's what people are angry about. And I think they're right to be angry about that. They're right. Yes, obviously we do have to enforce our laws as a country, right? And that if people illegally come into the country, there has to be a procedure through which they either become legal or they leave the country, right? I mean, that's just, any country has to have that. Let's be real here, but that has to be done through the rule of law, right? There has to be legal procedures. It can't just be, somebody grabs you and kicks you out of the country. Oh, and says because you have a tattoo, you're part of this group or whatever. There's a lot of things I'm hearing about how ICE has been conducting itself, that is not constitutional, right? And it's been happening in the United States, especially since 9/11, as there's been an erosion of our civil liberties. It's not unique to Trump. But it should still be opposed. And as a sincere person who opposes the low-wage police state, I don't think you should be kicked out of the country for your political beliefs about Palestine, for your tattoo, and without due process. I believe in due process of law. So there you go. I am in favor of due process. I'm in favor of freedom of speech. I don't, and this is where the woke people make things worse, right? This is the conversation that we should be having, right? Is that, what about due process? What about, what about free speech? And if the conversation is, oh, we don't want borders, open borders now, then that prevents the conversation. And that's one thing that the woke people do, is that, open borders now is not a real policy. It's not a serious policy. Every country in the world has borders. If we had a revolution tomorrow, we would still have borders. Even if we allowed everyone in the country, there would still be a border, and they'd have to show their passport and stamp it before we let them in, even if we had a policy of letting everyone in. Open borders now, no borders, a world without borders, that's not legitimate politics. And that's what woke people scream. And if you don't agree with them, you're racist. And that prevents us having a real conversation about due process and about all these things. And we need to have a conversation about all these issues, but the woke people just scream, open borders now, a world without borders. If you disagree, you're racist. We're on stolen land. I never want to hear that again. I'm sorry. That's one thing. I saw a bunch of signs. No one's illegal on stolen land. Are you kidding me? Oh, I guess we have to free all the prisoners from, all the mass murderers from jail, right? We're on stolen land. We have no right to enforce laws against murder. Oh, we got no right to enforce laws against rape. I mean, we're on stolen land. I mean, that's when woke is brain damage, right? And I saw that sign throughout the crowd. That's a woke sign. No one is illegal on stolen land. Well, I'm sorry. Yes, the way this land was acquired from the Native Americans is wrong. Absolutely. Native Americans deserve tribal sovereignty, their own territory, reparations for how they were treated. Absolutely. But if you're going to say no U.S. laws are legitimate because we're on stolen land, you can't have an argument, right? I mean, that's just not, so we're not going to have law in this country because we're on stolen land. That's ridiculous. It's stupid, right? It's stupid. It's embarrassing, right? And that's why people vote for Trump, is they say, okay, well, the choice is no one's illegal on stolen land. Well, that's dumb. I guess I'm going to vote for Trump, who says we do have laws. I mean, it's like woke is like, it's designed to make it impossible to have a conversation. It's like a triggered, shrill, angry response to politics, right? I'm mad. Like the world is unfair, which it is. Traumatic, awful things happen, which they do. So I'm going to be shrill and loud and scream at it. And you're a bad person if you disagree with me. And I'm a good person because I think this. And it's just like, okay, all right. It's not real politics. It's not sincere politics. And it's just virtue signal. It's performative. I want to show you how good I'm so against racism. I don't believe in borders. Well, good for you. Oh, great. I'm so impressed. You're so against racism. You don't believe in borders. Well, that's great. But we're running a country here. We do have borders. So we need to talk about the fact there's a problem, that all these people are coming across our border without papers, and we need to deal with it, and we need to resolve it. Now, I don't think the way to resolve it is with getting rid of due process of law. And I don't think the way to resolve it is to terrorize immigrant communities. But we do have a problem. And it's like, you can't acknowledge the problem, or you're a racist. And it's like, oh God. I mean, and it's just like, that's the trap that we've fallen into, right? It's like, you get all these people that are performing. They're so against racism. They're so virtuous. They think nonsense. And then, there's people that are defending bad things that are going on. It's a big mess. It's like prison abolition, right? Angela Davis, she did great stuff in the 70s when she was a fighter for the Black freedom struggle, when she was an advocate in defense of the Soviet Union, et cetera. But in the 90s, after the Soviet Union fell, after she quit the Communist Party and was part of committees of correspondence, she went into academia, and after she openly came out as being a lesbian and all of this, Angela Davis started talking about prison abolition. Remember when I heard about prison abolition, I'm like, that's what? We're just not going to have prisons? Like, that's weird. And then I started reading her books on it, and I realized what she was saying is we should reach the higher stage of communism. We should reach a society with so much wealth and abundance that crime doesn't go on, that we don't need a repressive institution of the state. Why don't you just say that? Right? That makes sense. But why are you calling it prison abolition? Why not just say you believe in, the higher stage of communism? And it was just like, I would read her books on prison abolition. It was all about how prisons are bad, which I agree. Racism, the prison industrial complex. Okay. And then we'd like to create a society where crime doesn't happen. Okay. I agree with that. But it's like, why are you calling it something that sounds insane to most people? You walk around and talk to most people and say, I want to abolish prisons. You sound like a nut. You sound like a fucking nut. So why are we going out of our way to say something that sounds like a fucking nutty thing when really what she's for is something that's, it's just been part of Marxism since the beginning of time. We eventually want to create a world with abundance, with economic opportunity for all, where there's no crime. But she calls it prison abolition, which sounds nuts to most people. But that's the problem with academia. See, in academia, that's super smart. Ooh, prison abolition. How could you possibly be for that? I'm going to read you a 500-page book. Oh, you're reinventing the wheel to try and make yourself sound smart. And it's cringe, right? The only way you can abolish prisons is to get to the higher stage of communism, a society of so much abundance where you don't need a state. That's thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years in the future. Okay. So talking about it right now is dumb, right? And it sounds nuts to most people, and it takes a really long time to explain, and it's nuts, right? And it's like, but it's like, it's this like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm so performative, this is what and it's the same with the open borders thing. The only way you can have a world with no borders is to create a world with so much vast material abundance, and so, there's really no need, we're talking about the higher stage of communism here. But most people don't have any conception of that. And you and I don't even have any conception of that. We're talking about a world with so much wealth, with so much abundance, and so much opportunity that the need for any coercion or oppressive institution goes away. So that's beyond what we can imagine, right? It's like, trying to explain our modern world and satellites and artificial intelligence to a caveman. He just doesn't understand. Right? If you were to go back in time 8,000 years and you go up to a caveman and try to explain to him how to make a call on your iPhone, he's just going to go, woo, 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 woo. He's not going to understand what you're saying. That's what the higher stage of communism is. We're talking about a world with so much wealth and so much abundance that the very need for any oppressive institution, any border, any prison goes away, right? And to us, again, it'll be so different from anything that we can understand, and we're talking at least hundreds of years in the future, probably thousands. It'd be, if someone from the higher stage of communism came back in time and started talking to you and I, we'd be like, woo, woo. It would be like trying to explain the caveman. It wouldn't make sense. So why in the world are we in the year of 2025 walking around and trying to convince people to adopt the higher stage of communism? It makes no goddamn sense, right? Yes, most people that are in prison right now should not be there. I 100% agree. 100%. And that, the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration, the war on drugs is awful. Let's have that conversation. But let's not call it prison abolition because it sounds dumb, right? And that's what woke people do is they take something that Marxists have been talking about and they make it this thing, and you're not allowed to disagree, right? Land back. Great example. What is land back? What is it? Right? Every time I talk to them about land back, it changes throughout the conversation. Sometimes land back is a nonprofit funded by George Soros that privatizes government land in Canada. Am I for that? No. Sometimes land back means that Indigenous people should have sovereignty and should get reparations for what's been done to them. I agree with that. Sometimes land back means that all white people need to leave North America because we're all living on stolen land and this is an illegal country. I don't agree with that. Tell me what land back means. But the point is, I'm not allowed to ask what it means. If I don't immediately just agree with it, I'm racist. Well, fuck that. Fuck that, right? If you want to talk about what land back means, tell me what it is, and I'll tell you whether I agree with it or not. But I'm allowed to ask what it is, and I'm not racist if I ask what it is, right? And that's the game that woke people play. It's about telling you you're not allowed to think, right? It's that you must immediately agree with us and bow down before us and repeat whatever we're saying. And if you disagree, you're a Nazi. No, I mean, if by land back, you mean that Native people should have their own territory, I'm on board. If by land back, you mean Indigenous people should receive reparations for the crimes committed against them, I'm agree with you. But if land back means deport all white people from North America, no, I'm not for that. Not realistic. If land back means privatizing government-owned land in Canada so that George Soros and Bill Gates can build luxury housing in the name of helping Native Americans, can make lots of money off of real estate, I'm not for that. And I have the right to say, what does land back mean? And then when you tell me what it is, I have the right to look at that and say whether I'm for it or not. And the idea that, oh, shut up, white man, you're not allowed to think anything. Well, no, I am going to think things. And, and I'm sorry if that makes me an autistic white male, right? I'm sorry if that makes me a bad person, but, you tell me what the policy is, and I'll tell you whether I agree with it or not. And it's that simple, right? You tell me what the policy is, and I'll tell you whether I agree with it or not. And, woke is about telling you you're not allowed to ask those questions. It's about, performative. I'm just so anti-racist. I believe this crazy thing and you better believe it too, or you're a bad person. It's about wanting to be better. Go read, go to the CPI website. We have a pamphlet, Do You Believe in Growth? And the first section of it is all about woke and what woke is, right? You can go to the CPI website right now. You can read our, Do You Believe in Growth pamphlet. We'll tell you all about it. You can read, you can read it on the website, right? Do you believe in growth? Why Russia and China keep rising while U.S. society stifles innovation. And you can go and you can read all about it, right? You can read all about, what the problem with wokeism is. There you go. There you go. Yeah. And this is, Gabby, and I understand what you're saying. And this is, again, they're opposed to any form of populism because they're against the majority. They think the majority are bad. So they're always looking for a marginalized group that they can champion against the majority, right? And this is anti-populism. This is Trotskyism, and this is Zionism, really. This is crypto-Zionism. But this is, woke has a huge Zionist influence. But, in Western European civilization, unfortunately, Jewish people have been discriminated against historically. They've been forced to live in ghettos, the Holocaust, et cetera. And the, Jewish people, have, they've been the others in Western civilization for hundreds of years, for at least 1,000 years, right? And so, Lenin wrote about the spirit of the ghetto, this idea that, that they're always separate, they're always different, right? And that this fear of the majority. And Marxism was opposed to the spirit of the ghetto. Karl Marx wrote this pamphlet that's pretty insensitive and rude called On the Jewish Question, where he basically said, I don't want to be this. I want to organize with the working class. And then Lenin wrote a paper on the Bund question where he said the same thing. He said, look, the spirit of the ghetto, we want nothing to do with this. No, we're not going to form a separate communist group just for Jews. We're going to form the Bolsheviks for everybody. And that Marxism was always opposed to the spirit of the ghetto. And the spirit of the ghetto, Zionism or soft Zionism, is this belief that the people in Western European civilization are inherently bad. They're all lynchers. They're all pogromists. They're all Ku Klux Klan. They're all Nazis deep down. And so we need to suppress the majority. And in order to show everyone how bad the majority is, we need to find some minority that we can celebrate to show everyone how bad the majority is. Well, we're not opposed to helping minorities, but the reason we want to help minorities is because it lifts up everybody, right? Racism hurt all working people, most especially Black people, but it was bad for all working people. So lifting up Black people is about lifting up the majority. We want to lift up the oppressed first. We want to put their needs at the center, but we want to lift up everybody. However, the spirit of the ghetto says, no, everybody is bad, and we're going to prove to you how bad everyone is by finding a minority and lifting up that minority and show it. And that's the game that they play, right? The Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx says, right, we fight for the immense majority, right? He says that all previous political movements in history have been movements of minorities. We fight on behalf of the immense majority, right? However, the spirit of the ghetto says the immense majority are bad, right? That says the bulk of the population in Western civilization are racist, are anti-Semitic, they're all bad. And so in order to show everyone how bad they are and show them why they need to be restrained, we're going to find different groups. And that's why, the crypto-Zionist, the Trotskyist, that mindset, the spirit of the ghetto, is always looking to find, whether it's a sexual minority or it's a national, a racial, an ethnic, it's always looking for some minority that it can uphold as a way to attack the majority, right? And that's the difference, right? I've lashed out the book To Kill a Mockingbird, right? To Kill a Mockingbird is Zionist propaganda. It's crypto-Zionist, spirit of the ghetto propaganda, right? The fight it takes place in the 1930s, right? And it's about this small town in the South where a black man is falsely accused of rape, and all the poor white working class people, all the rednecks, want to kill him. And this wealthy lawyer with a heart of gold, Atticus Finch, tries to hold back the rednecks, but he fails. And it's such a tragedy. Right? And that book has absolutely nothing to do with the struggle against racism in the 1930s. In the 1930s, the struggle against racism was led by the Communist Party, and they built sharecroppers unions, black and white together, and they fought for the rights of poor people. And it was through the class struggle that white workers ripped up their Ku Klux Klan cards and embraced their black brothers and sisters and built a working class movement. That's what happened in the 1930s. But in the 1960s, they published this book called To Kill a Mockingbird about how racism isn't caused by capitalism, and the oppression of black people isn't caused by imperialism and all that. It's actually caused by race. It's caused by the majority, by the racist bubbas. Oh, I'm a racist. It's caused by poor people. Racism is caused by poor people. And what we need is rich people, smart rich people with a heart of gold who are good to hold back the poor whites, right? That's that's not a Marxist message. That's not an anti-imperialist message. It's not a class struggle message. That's an anti-populist message. The villains in To Kill a Mockingbird are not the big bankers and the big corporations that kept Jim Crow intact so they could super exploit the black people. No, the villain are the poor white people, right? They're the villains in the book. It's a problem, but it's the mindset. It's the mindset that, they see the white, poor white workers are the enemy. And so if we can, and this is a really complicated issue. And this is what makes people really, really angry. But I'm, I don't know what, I guess I'm autistic enough to call this out and just call it out for what it is. This anti-populism is why socialism and a working class movement in America is not going to happen, right? As long as you have, this belief that the masses of the people are the enemy, as long as you're always looking for some obscure minority to be the champion of, we're going to fail. And this is Zionism. This is crypto-Zionism. It's the spirit of the ghetto. It's this belief that the masses of people are the enemy. The masses of people are not the enemy, right? And most of the people promoting this stuff are not Jewish at this point, right? I mean, this is the bread tube mindset. And a lot of them are not Jewish. ContraPoints isn't Jewish, right? I guess Vosh, I was told he was Jewish, but I guess he's Polish, right? We don't hate Jews, right? But Zionism, the Zionist mindset, the idea that the Jew is so different and so special, right, that he needs to be separate, right? And that the majority of the people living in white European civilization are dangerous racists who need to be suppressed. That mindset, that's crypto-Zionism, because then that leads to, well, the Jewish people need to have their own state to be separate from the white majority, because the white majority is just so evil and they're always going to be oppressed. That's the spirit of the ghetto. It's crypto-Zionism. And that mindset has overtaken leftism since the 1950s and 60s because of the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program. Susan Sontag, Hannah Arendt, and all of them, that mindset that the majority of the American people are the enemy, that mindset has kind of overtaken what it means to be a leftist in America. And I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that. And that's why I am so widely hated by leftists, is because I don't accept that. I don't think the majority are the enemy. In fact, I think we need to champion the majority, right? We need to champion the majority of all races, black, white, Arab, Latino. We need working people to come together. And we do need to, have special attention to the oppression of black people. We need to lift up black communities. We need to lift up such groups, but we're doing it because we're fighting for the immense majority, not because the immense majority are bad and we want to show everyone how evil, racist America is, right? And we need to, get past the spirit of the ghetto. We need to get past crypto-Zionism. And I've said that many times, and I will say it again. And, one day they're going to find this. I'm convinced they're going to find this on my streams. They're going to clip me saying this, and they're going to say, see, he hates Jews. But they've said, at this point, they've said everything they could possibly say about me. So whatever. I mean, people say that, well, anyway, I'm not even going to repeat what people say. People say so many awful things about me. At this point, I just don't even care. You can't care anymore. You just got to do what's right. You got to understand that God put you where you are for a purpose and that you have something important to do. And that's why you're here. Well, listen, everybody, it's been 3 hours, but that's okay because it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've been on here. I'm really glad to be back. I don't know if I'm going home to New York tomorrow or if I'm going to stay here in LA. I don't quite know what the plan is. What I do know is that I'm really glad to be back. I love all of you. And I also know that we need you. We absolutely need you in Chicago, right? This is going to be the biggest CPI event that we have ever done. It's going to be really important. The links are down below. The links are down below. Register if you're coming. Send us a donation if you can't make it. It's going to be really important. I can't wait to see you all there. And I'm glad to be back. Keep your eye out. I'm going to have some crazy riot footage posted soon. I love all of you. And we have something very, very special. We really, really do. And that what we need now more than anything is community. So thank you all for waiting for me, while I was away and while I was sick. And, thank you all for being supportive and sticking with this community, even though it might be difficult, even though we get challenged, even though social media is rigged against us and all that. Thank you for sticking with this community. I love all of you. I really do. And if it wasn't for you all, I would have given up a long time ago. But you all believe in me and I believe in you. We're doing something very, very special. Much love to everyone who has supported CPI, who has donated to help the convention happen. Dare to struggle, dare to win, everybody. I'm going to say goodnight for now.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.